Chapter 202. The demon has no clue, he can't even think of a reasonable reason. How did things become like this? What went wrong? But there are only 2 seconds left for him to think. The doppelganger of Kun Wuxi is finally pulled back. No, it should be said that it is seized back. Previously he thought that the power of Lord Dongting's smoke wave Dongting painting was limited. It takes a lot of effort to pull the doppelganger of Kun Wuxi back. But when Lord Dongting pulls Li Yunxin into the water, the doppelganger of the Taoist of the mysterious realm is almost pulled from the sky to the ground in an instant. Lord Dongting deliberately held back and stalled for time. But why did he do that? Hatred can't figure it out at all. The doppelganger of the Taoist's soul falls to the ground. Looking at the Dongting in the distance and then at hatred, it sneers, "Good, good, good. I want to go, but you don't want I to go. Since that old thing doesn't want to help you, then I will help you." Hatred is silent for a while and then he says with hatred, "You? Humph. Take my palm." As soon as he finishes his words, the big demon of the mysterious realm immediately rushes up to the sky. It is his turn to escape. 2 flowers bloom, one on each side. While the Taoist of the mysterious realm and the demon are chasing, Li Yunxin is pulled into the lake by Lord Dongting. It is the first time for him to go into the water since he came to this world, to immerse himself in the water. Although there is no water-repelling spell or water-repelling bead, he doesn't need to worry about getting his clothes wet. After all, he is also a Yin spirit. Usually he can hide his body and pass through walls. At this time it is not a problem for him to hide in the water. He has returned to his human form. But his face is blue and his mouth is tightly closed. He doesn't say a word. Ordinary people will say that he is guilty and afraid when they see him like this. But Lord Dongting doesn't see it like this. In fact, after entering the water, Lord Dongting let go of him and just silently goes straight to the bottom of the lake. Without any hesitation, Li Yunxin follows him with a blue face. This was not a wonderful feeling. The lake was deep and it wasn't clear seawater with a sunny white beach. Moreover, it was nighttime. When he was a few meters into the water, the moonlight had already disappeared, and his body seemed to be wrapped in the deepest darkness. Below him was an even deeper darkness. He did not know what was hidden there, nor did he know how deep it was. The only light came from the Lord Dongting and himself. There are almost no fish in the water, but there is a layer of dead fish floating on the water. Kun Wuxi cast spells to overturn Dongting, but he also killed a lot of people. Just like that, he dove down for an entire breath's worth of time. Only then did Lord Dongting slow down and turn to look at Li Yunxin. It was a Dharmakaya that looked like a tall and fat man with the head of a carp. "So you're the one who saw me back then?" Lord Dongting opened and closed his wide mouth. His voice was a little distorted in the water, and it was mixed with the rumbling background sound from somewhere in the lake. "At that time my shrimp soldiers disguised as boatmen and took you and 3 people from Egret town to Mount June. At that time he told me that you looked afraid of water. After that I threw you and Song Yunzi down the mountain. You also found a boat to cross the lake. Later my daughter took you to see Ling Kongzi and Muyun in a white jade boat. According to her, you also looked nervous and afraid, which is exactly what you look like now. So you are afraid of water? You are already a shadow god and dragons. Why are you afraid?" Lord Dongting's tone was calm as if he was chatting with a passerby who happened to meet him. But Li Yunxin knew that now he was almost in the palm of Lord Dongting. Dongting had been run by him for 3,000 years and it was almost the body of this big demon. However, such a situation could be considered as having no choice or premeditated. Dongting was right next to his bed. He had wanted to explore it for a long time. Today was a good opportunity. Maybe. "I'm afraid of water indeed. Otherwise I wouldn't be like this now," Li Yunxin said after a while. "As for why I'm afraid, it's because I was drowned when I was alive. It was a terrible experience. I can't forget it and I don't want to forget it. Dragons who are afraid of water, I think I'm the first one." "You are Li Yunxin dragons and Qi-Wen." Lord Dongting was silent for a while and whispered, "So where is the original Qi-Wen?" "Dead. Killed by you. I had to. Tell me." Lord Dongting slowed down a little more. It was completely dark around. But at the bottom of the lake, far away, there was a little light. It was a faint white light, as if there was a piece of glowing white moss at the bottom of the lake. But Li Yunxin knew that those seemingly small branches were not really small. It was because they were too far away. The depth of Dongting Lake, at least at this moment, was about 1,000 meters. And in his original world, the middle section of a big river named Xianxia River, the depth of navigation was only a few meters. Even some places were only 2 or 3 meters deep. In the depth of the 1,000-meter lake, Lord Dongting repeats again, "Tell me. Then I'll think about it. I'll decide whether to take you to Red Flower City or to take your body to Red Flower City." Li Yunxin exhaled slowly. A series of tiny bubbles came out of her mouth and she rose up shakily. Then he smiled, "I killed your son. You haven't killed me to avenge your son. Haven't you made a decision?" After saying this, Lord Dongting suddenly stopped. His eyes emitted a terrible blue light in the lake, like 2 dazzling searchlights. His robe inlaid with red scales also fluttered in the water, which made him look like he was performing a play, but a horrible and bloody play. He would pounce on the person in front of him in the next moment and tear him into pieces. He breathed horribly, which could be heard clearly even in the depth of the lake. You know about it? Chiwen has a fish body and a dragon head. When I first met you, I said that the 9th young master couldn't forget you before he died, and you cried. Li Yunxin sighed. If you're not his father, are you his brother? How can it be? Li Yunxin floated in the water and looked at Lord Dongting. Yes. It's hard for people and demons in this world to associate a carp transformed into a demon with Dragon Sun's father. But I happen to know something else. In fact, it's not even a deduction. Maybe in another world some things are far-fetched legends. But here it's a fact. I know the legends of another world, so I know the facts of this world. Sounds hard to understand, but... Li Yunxin sighed again. I'm sorry to kill your son. We were indeed friends at the beginning, at least he thought so. When I met him for the first time, Li Yunxin slowly told the story of him and the 9th young master under thousands of feet of water in Dongting. He skipped some things and processed some things. He didn't judge and only stated facts. Lord Dongting's mood was fluctuating because of many things. He also knew that Li Yunxin couldn't leave Dongting without his permission. He was already on the chopping block. That was why he had the patience to figure out everything in detail. So it's hard to say whether he was vigilant enough when listening to Li Yunxin's narration of those facts. It was like a middle-aged man holding a sharp knife in his hand while listening to a child in his own apartment. Was he or was he not vigilant enough? Therefore he didn't realize that Li Yunxin used some skills when talking. In fact, he had been using these skills before. Hatred thought that Li Yunxin was talking to him by the lake. In fact, every word and look of Li Yunxin was done for Lord Dongting. Just to plant a strong and sad but powerless seed in his heart. This seed would quickly take root and germinate, breaking the heart defense of an old father who lost his son. So the current situation came. Lord Dongting suppressed the complex emotions in his heart and listened to Li Yunxin's many words. He might not be patient, but he must be patient. Because both he and Li Yunxin's hints told him that he must figure out the cause of his son's death. Your son is, in fact, thinking of you in silence. What Li Yunxin wants is the current situation. Give him enough time and a calm environment to talk to a 3,000-year-old monster who is not calm. For him, words are even more powerful than Taoism as long as he has a chance. He repeats some words and intensifies some emotions. The deep water of Dongting is quiet and dark. It's the best hypnotic environment for him. He doesn't know how effective his best skills can be on this 3,000-year-old non-human monster, but he believes that it won't be in vain. Lord Dongting thinks this bottomless water is his domain. But he doesn't know that he also breaks into Li Yunxin's domain because of this environment. From the moment he suspected that Chiwen was the son of Lord Dongting, Li Yunxin had been looking forward to such a favorable time and place like today. Now it finally comes to this step. In this 1 hour's time he used all the techniques he could use. In the end he sighed. This is the current situation. He doesn't speak. There is still a low background sound in the lake. It's the sound of the surging undercurrent in the lake. Lord Dongting is silent for a long time and then he says, "If I ask you how you became Chiwen, you won't answer me." Li Yunxin smiles helplessly. "I took over her body." Of course, Lord Dongting doesn't hear this sentence. He is silent for a while and then he says, "Follow me." Then he dives to the bottom of the lake. Li Yunxin breathes a sigh of relief. A bubble appears around him and then he follows Lord Dongting. This time it's faster. After another quarter of an hour, the thing he saw at the bottom of the lake like white moss quickly becomes bigger. And it becomes too big. When he first met Hong Yang, she said she lived in White Woods, Safflower City. At that time he thought that White Woods referred to some kind of white algae or water plants deep at the bottom of the lake. Now he sees it with his own eyes and he knows it's a real woods. Just like the towering trees on land, every tree in this White Woods is white. Most of them have symmetrical branches on the left and right sides, and there may be light-colored algae growing on the branches. The tallest one is 100 meters and the shortest one is dozens of meters. When they get closer to this White Woods, Li Yunxin can feel how big it is. He can't see the end of it, just like a dense and wide forest on land. He estimates that in this White Woods, there are at least thousands of such trees. But in fact they are not trees. They are skeletons, most of them are spines. Most of them are fish and only a few are terrestrial animals. Li Yunxin has seen Lord Dongting's unimaginably huge real body, but he is still shocked after seeing these spines. So many spines are inserted straight into the bottom of the lake. This is the White Woods. They are all defeated by me. Lord Dongting stops on a thick branch. This bone tree is more than 100 meters tall. It's not the shortest, but it's not the tallest either. The two of them are in human form. At this moment they are standing on this spine as if they are standing on a wide bridge. It's hard to imagine what kind of existence the owner of this skeleton was when he was alive. In this White Woods, there are 4,667 trees, all of which are demons that have attained the Tao. Lord Dongting points at the tallest spine. This is a soaring dragon. When it was alive, its cultivation level was at the profound realm. Took me more than a month to kill it. Then he points at a shorter skeleton. This is a coiled dragon. He is cunning, but he is very beautiful. My daughter was almost charmed by him. Ben Jun also killed him, but this skeleton still looks beautiful now. Li Yunxin silently listens. Lord Dongting points at those skeletons and says with great familiarity. After talking about dozens of them, he turns around and looks at him, saying, "Even the weakest of these demons has the same cultivation level as you. In this world, there are only a few hundred demons that are above the true realm." Li Yunxin takes a deep breath, but only inhales the lake water. How can there be so many high-level demons? However, this is not what he really focuses on. But, you said, flood dragons. He looks at Lord Dongting. The dozens you just mentioned are all flood dragons. I saw that the dozens you pointed out and the thousands you pointed out all look the same. You mean, these thousands are all flood dragon bones? Lord Dongting smiles peacefully. Yes. Li Yunxin suddenly finds that he can't see through him. Not long ago he thought that his words have worked on the other side, and he was waiting to reap the fruits of his victory. But at this moment he feels that things are getting out of his control. For the first time he feels uncertain. He exhales softly. How can there be so many of them? How can you kill so many of them? And, did you give them the name, Flood Dragon? Lord Dongting doesn't answer immediately, but looks at Li Yunxin with a strange and complicated expression, as if he wants to see through him. Then he says, "You have never heard of this word in the secular world, have you? And you have never heard of such a thing as Flood Dragon in this world, have you?" "That's right." Lord Dongting laughs. Because there is no such word as flood dragon in the secular world. Even if you write it down and ask the most knowledgeable scholar, they won't recognize it. But you are interested in it. Li Yunxin, where have you heard of this word? The atmosphere seems to have become subtle. Li Yunxin looks at Lord Dongting, and realizes that he has underestimated him again. At first he thinks that Lord Dongting is a demon that looks like a human but is a little slow. Later he realizes that Lord Dongting is not as slow as he looks. On the contrary, he is also a sophisticated person. He used to think that a demon with both strength and strategy is already amazing. This time, Lord Dongting really regards him as an opponent and tries his best to control everything. However, now he realizes that he seems to have underestimated Lord Dongting for the third time. He will not admit that Lord Dongting is smarter than him. But at least he knows that Lord Dongting is not inferior to him. He looks at the 3,000-year-old demon in front of him. How did Lord Dongting suddenly come up with this word? Come up with this word? Lord Dongting laughs. I didn't come up with this word. It was another person who told me that something that looks like a dragon but has no horns is a flood dragon. If you see them, just kill them all. What do you think I have been doing in Dongting for 2,000 years? As for where these flood dragons come from and who told me that word, Li Yunxin, this is also the reason why I won't kill you. Lord Dongting stops laughing. His face became solemn like a god in deep water. He opens his mouth and sighs first, saying, "You just played some tricks on me. Although I don't understand you and I can't see through you, I know you are bewitching people. In fact, it can't be called bewitching. It should be a more brilliant way. You killed this monarch's son and you want to rely on this method to make this monarch let you go? How dare you? If it wasn't for you guessing Ben Jun's intentions wrongly and getting the wrong direction from the beginning, perhaps things would have really succeeded by now. You are now Qi and my son used to be Qi. Maybe I love my son so much that I have some expectation in my heart when I see Qi. Knowing that my dead son can't be found, maybe I won't kill you and get some compensation. Oh, if ordinary people know what you are thinking, they will scold you for being whimsical. It's impossible. I also thought so by the lake, but after hearing what you just said, I almost fell into your trap. Now I'm just curious, what kind of trick is this? Thinking about it, it's not like a holy spell or a Taoist spell. At this time, Li Yunxin can finally be sure that everything he has done has been completely seen through. Would he be able to survive? Maybe he can only rely on his luck. But he doesn't feel panic or fear. On the contrary, he felt himself getting excited. A kind of excitement which he knows is sick but he can't control quickly occupies his body, making him want to have a good fight with this big monster in front of him, which is beyond his expectation. He wants to see, in this Dongting, how many secrets are hidden. He should have suppressed this kind of emotion like countless times before. Bai Yanjun said he was crazy and some people said he was crazy. But he didn't know the crazy in their eyes. It's his reason after suppressing it. It's the study of the mind. Li Yunxin finally laughed. This laughter sounds a little crazy. Because he realizes that he may have touched something. Something he has been trying to grasp but couldn't grasp before. Now it appears in front of him. This makes him more excited. Chapter 203. Mind study, he repeated again and looked at Lord Dongting with a smile. You are absolutely right. I have guessed that your son is Qi. Now that I have also become Qi, I thought you would miss your son. I thought you would cry for him. You miss him and cry for him. Then how much you hate me, the enemy who killed your son, will be how much you miss your son who was killed. These two feelings are not completely opposite, there is a subtle boundary between them. So when I told you those things just now, I was trying to study it carefully. I kept hinting and guiding you. Step by step, I weakened the hatred in your heart and magnified the pity in your heart. In the end, you will be completely hypnotized by me. Your memory of your son will completely overwhelm your hatred for me, so you will treat me as a substitute for the 9th young master. In the end, not only will you spare my life, but you will also compensate me double. This is indeed something that seems to go against common sense and is unimaginable. But it's not impossible. There are more victims who fall in love with kidnappers. This is the same logic. This is the mind study. Li Yunxin laughed out loud. What a pity, my goal was wrong from the beginning. You're not crying for your son at all. Am I right? Does sound interesting. Lord Dongting lowered his eyes and stroked his beard. Yes. I'm not crying for him. So you don't really care about how I became Qi. Indeed I don't care, Lord Dongting said calmly. I also don't care about your mind study. You think I will be curious? Alas, you are just a child after all. You don't know many things, for example people. When a child sees his mother making a new dress with a thread and a piece of cloth, he will be curious and want to know how it was made. But when this child grows up and becomes a human, he will see more things. One day he will see a man performing a magic trick and spitting out a sword from his mouth. This thing is much more magical than his mother making clothes. But he will not be curious anymore. Because he has seen a lot, he knows that there are many strange things in this world that cannot be explored by human beings. After seeing so many strange things, they aren't strange anymore. That's why your schemes are useless against me. Lord Dongting narrowed his eyes and looked at the deep darkness at the bottom of the lake. I won't cry for him. He had been sealed in the Wei River for more than 1,000 years and had always regarded me as an enemy that he could not get rid of and was deeply afraid of. But Ben Jun doesn't have any feelings for him. Well, in fact I do. But it's not what you think. I'm crying because you saw a fan and thought of a woman and you tossed and turned restlessly. You cherish the fan and use it as a token of your affection, but how can it be the fan you love? That woman gave you a jade bottle back then. You also like jade bottles. Sigh. But one day the fan was destroyed and you shed tears. Tell me, are these tears shed for the fan or for the woman? Lord Dongting sighed and shook his head. Why do you think that I would shed tears over a fan? Li Yunxin was silent for a while, then laughed. Good. It's my fault. I didn't expect you to be so perverted, to use a child as a prop to miss the child's mother. But it's understandable. In the secular world there are many people who think of a heartless person when they see a child, and then vent their anger on that child. You are all perverts. So, you are the Shinryu's son-in-law? Looking at the 9th young master, I think of Shinryu. Now the 9th young master is dead, but I'm still Chiwen as long as I'm Chiwen. Looking at me, I can also think of Shinryu, so he doesn't kill me. But the dragon has 9 sons. Li Yunxin laughed. Don't you feel uncomfortable? There are probably 8 other son-in-laws like you, right? Lord Dongting stared at Li Yunxin for a while and sneered. You are not afraid of death. But what do you know? You've been wrong once and now you're wrong for the second time. Why don't you think about why I brought you to Dongting? Maybe you really want to leave, but you need someone to look after the house. There must be something important in Dongting Lake. Maybe it's because of that thing that made these things. Li Yunxin raised his hand and pointed at the white woods in front of him. Now that things have come to this point, Lord Dongting, tell me your conditions. I'm not in a good situation now, so I may be willing to help you. These words sounded arrogant. But Lord Dongting didn't sneer. Instead, he seriously pondered for a while before suddenly raising his head to look towards the deep lake to the west. After looking for a while, he said, It's not safe to stay here for a long time. Let's go to Safflower City to talk about those things. After saying that, he ignored Li Yunxin and flew into the skeleton forest. Li Yunxin followed him without hesitation. He thought the white woods were white water plants and algae. But it turned out to be a forest of flood dragon bones. So he began to think, what would this Safflower City look like? He remembered that he once saw Ling Kongzi Muyun. This Lord Dongting was a man-eater. Then, the white woods were the bone woods. Safflower City. Was it a city of flesh and blood? He followed Lord Dongting around the white woods and went straight into the depths. Probably because those bones used to belong to higher demons, they were still emitting white light even though they had been at the bottom of the lake for so many years. This made the light in the woods soft and bright. Even Li Yunxin felt like he was in the elves' jungle. In such a light, Lord Dongting stopped in front of a spine dozens of meters high. This spine was inconspicuous in the woods, and its surface was covered with a layer of light green algae. The big demon whispered, Here we are. Li Yunxin took a closer look at the front. However, he saw nothing. He frowned slightly and grunted in a low voice. He was ready to deal with any possible traps and attacks. But the next moment, Lord Dongting moved to the other side. So Li Yunxin saw a red flower. It was really just an ordinary red flower. It was the kind of small red flower that you could see growing in the wild grass in spring, summer, or autumn. It had 5, 6, or 7 or 8 petals. It had a yellow stamen and 1 or 2 petals were slightly broken. Such a red flower, the size of a thumb, was timidly attached to a piece of algae and placed in a gap of the thick spine. If not for Li Yunxin's good eyesight, if not for Lord Dongting looking in that direction, he would never have found this thing. This is Safflower City. A strange smile appeared on Lord Dongting's face. It was a smile that only people who were immersed in a happy past would have. It is also my palace. Li Yunxin realized that the palace he was referring to was the Dragon Palace of Dragons. Fiendish demons that were worshipped would give birth to their own spatial palace. If they were powerful dragons, they would have a dragon palace. This Lord Dongting was not a dragon, so he called it a palace. The original palace would take on different forms depending on the wishes of the fiendish demons. Li Yunxin did not know what the 9th young master's former palace looked like, but his palace was inside his folding fan. Now that he had become a great demon at the true realm, his palace should have become a dragon palace. He was known as the Wei River Dragon King and now he had his own palace. However, the folding fan did not seem to have changed. Li Yunxin did not know what the dragon palace that he had upgraded from a palace to a dragon palace. Because no one had taught him this. He could put many things into the folding fan, but he had never thought of trying to run in himself. He was more worried that something would happen if he went in and he would not be able to come out. It would be so embarrassing. And this red flower in front of him, was it Red Flower City? Red Lady's ghost wedding was quite grand, with dozens of prawn soldiers and crab generals accompanying her. So many fiendish demons. Were they all living in such a small red flower in Red Flower City? He looked at it in a daze. Lord Dongting smiles faintly. So you didn't check your palace carefully? Now that it is called a dragon palace, it should be a big change. You are an interesting person. Afraid of water, but you became dragons. You dare to seek death in front of me, but don't dare to look at your little thing. You are interesting too. A great demon, but he made such a thing that women like. Lord Dongting was not angry. As if he did not hear the mockery in Li Yunxin's words, he leaned forward and touched the flower petal. When I was a red carp, there was a woman in a shallow stream, who plucked a red flower and threw it to my side. And I sensed this, so I became intelligent. He turned around and looked at Li Yunxin with a smile. Do you know who that woman was? Li Yunxin smiled. A Shinryu in human form? Lord Dongting snorted and laughed. There are too many things you don't know, and you will know them sooner or later. If you can leave my Red Flower City tomorrow, I will tell you. Come with me. After saying this, Lord Dongting pounced on the red flower, and his huge body immediately disappeared. Only Li Yunxin was left floating in front of the red flower, surrounded by the deep lake water. At this time he could escape far away. But when he looked at the bone forest around him, he gave up the idea. Profound Realm Hatred wanted to kill Profound Realm Kunwuzi, but he had to go through a lot of trouble and ask Lord Dongting to help him. It was not easy for a Profound Realm Cultivator to kill a Profound Realm Cultivator. The dead Emperor of the Li Kingdom killed 2 Profound Realm and 3 True Realm Cultivators, but he didn't kill them all. One of them came back with his ocean of chi and mountain of snow destroyed. But here, each of these 4,000 skeletons represented a great demon above the True Realm, and there were countless Profound Realm Cultivators, right? It was probably more than all the Profound Realm Cultivators in the whole of Daotong combined. Lord Dongting had been imprisoned here for 2,000 years. On average, he had killed 2 True Realm and Profound Realm Flood Dragons every year. But he had survived until now. Li Yunxin realized that the impression she had of him in the past and everyone's estimation of his strength and realm might have been wrong. The reason why he was speaking to her so calmly was probably because he had absolute confidence in himself. In front of such confidence, he couldn't run away. That would be a stupid and cowardly choice. Lord Dongting didn't say how to enter the Red Flower City, but it shouldn't be difficult. Li Yunxin tried to sense it with Wacken, and he easily found a small vortex. It was like a vortex made of Wacken or a disorder of time and space. It was a familiar feeling. He did the same and put other things into his summer palace. He didn't hesitate anymore. He frowned and rushed forward. There was no darkness or possible discomfort as he imagined. One moment he rushed forward with a frown, and the next moment he was no longer in Dongting Lake. What the hell is Lord Dongting doing? He was still in Dongting. However, he was not at the bottom of the lake, nor around Dongting, which was destroyed by Kunwuzi today. Instead, he was in Dongting, where the sun was shining and the grass was long and the orioles were flying. The reason why Li Yunxin knew it was Dongting was that he was standing on an island. This island looked familiar. He had a good memory. He glanced around and realized it might be Mount June. The real Mount June Island was a big island with a mountain hundreds of meters high. But this Mount June Island was small and low. The real Mount June was not far from the shore. People could cross it with a small boat. But now this Mount June was far away from the shore on the other side. It was almost in the middle of the lake. Li Yunxin realized that this seemed to be what Dongting looked like a long time ago. A long time ago, the silt brought by the Weishui River was not so much, and the bottom of the lake was not so silted. The area of Dongting should be larger. Just like now, the tall and beautiful Mount June in his later life was just a small island, and Dongting was wider and more vast. Looking around, there were curling clouds where the water and the sky met. According to the vast area of this world, this lake may be larger than a sea in his world. In the palace of Lord Dongting, there was such a vast world hidden. He stood on Mount June and found that there was no one around. Looking up at the shore, he only saw lush vegetation. It should be the end of spring and the beginning of summer in this world, and the flowers were in full bloom. The green on the distant shore was dotted with colorful colors. And then he thought he saw smoke. He didn't hesitate anymore. Frowning slightly, he looked at the lake in front of him and flew to the shore. The scene on the shore soon became clear in his field of vision. Li Yunxin saw where the smoke came from. There was a shallow stream behind the flowers and plants on the shore. The stream made a turn when it was about to flow into Dongting. It circled a shoal covered with pebbles and grass. There was a moonlight tree by the shoal. It was the same size as the moonlight tree that Lu Laodao used to see at the gate of the Dragon King Temple. Just like the first day Li Yunxin came to the city of Wei, this moonlight tree was covered with tiny flowers. Small pink petals covered the green grass, which looked beautiful and dreamy, but one person spoiled the scene. Lord Dongting, who had a tall dharmakaya and a fish head, was wearing a peasant's shorts. He sat under the moonlight tree and made a bonfire. Without the big red robe, he looked a little funny now. The bonfire didn't seem to be made by magic. It was wet wood and there was black smoke in the fire. A woman in yellow sat on the other side of the bonfire. She was not beautiful, but she was young and delicate. She looked a little numb, sitting on her knees. She looked at the shallow stream with a red flower in her hand. And Lord Dongting was roasting a fish. Chapter 204. Seeing Li Yunxin coming over and standing down, he doesn't even look up. He just says, "Sit down." Li Yunxin doesn't know what he is doing. He just takes a careful look at the fish pierced on the branch by Lord Dongting. It's a waste, a good red carp, but it seems that the fish's internal organs are not removed. It's pierced from the mouth to the tail with a branch and roasted on the fire. It's not cooked and it doesn't smell good. It was more like something that a rich young lady who had never been involved in worldly affairs came up with when she was in the mood for a rare occasion. However, it's strange that a carp's spirit roasts a carp. Li Yunxin doesn't think Lord Dongting will do this for no reason, so he also kneels down in front of the woman in yellow without saying a word. The woman doesn't have any obvious reaction. She is still silent. After sitting like this for a while, Lord Dongting turns over the fish on the fire. Staring at the fish, he says, "The Dongting in my palace is what the Dongting outside looked like 3,000 years ago. More than 3,000 years ago I was a red carp just like this." He looks at Li Yunxin. "I was swimming in this shallow water." The woman was wearing light yellow clothes. She held a red flower in her hand and lit a fire under the tree. She was so hungry that she wanted to catch a fish and roast it. When she saw me, "This woman. Who is that woman?" Li Yunxin glances at the woman in yellow opposite him. There is nothing special about her. The most reasonable inference may be that Lord Dongting abducts her and places her here as a plaything. "Who is she?" Lord Dongting laughs. "Of course you know her. I don't kill you partly because of her. Alas, things in the world are changeable. Fate is also changeable. Do you think it's a blessing or a misfortune?" That woman was just a little Taoist who just started to cultivate Taoism more than 3,000 years ago. She knew a little Taoist, but she didn't have any supernatural power. She looked embarrassed at that time. In this world there were countless human cultivators. In the end, so many people failed to cultivate the great Tao and died. Even if a profound realm cultivator's Taoist magic was extremely powerful, how much lifespan did he have? 1,000 years was considered a long time. Ascending to immortalization in 600 to 700 years is not considered a short life. But she has only lived for 3,000 years. Li Yunxin was silent for a while, then slowly exhaled. "Calligrapher or sword saint? Don't worry." Lord Dongting waved his hand. The smell of the fish was finally getting better. But this woman later married another man. The man she married was also a man of striking appearance. They have a son. Logically speaking, according to the human cultivators, this child was a Tao child. However, he did not like to cultivate. He did not love cultivation, but he loved the prosperity of the world. At that time, Dongting was surrounded by water and there was no emperor. It was called Nans. Back then this place was called the 100 Kingdoms of Nans, Li Yunxin said. The first time he went to see Lord Dongting, he tricked shopkeeper Ding, Officer Zhao, and Officer Sun of Egret Town into bringing him there. When the three of them talked about the name Lord Dongting on the boat, they also mentioned the history of the Qin Kingdom. He used to think that it was unofficial history and couldn't be true. Unexpectedly, it was confirmed by Lord Dongting today. "When I went to Mount June to see you, I heard on the boat that 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, Lord Dongting helped the king of the Wei Kingdom to unify the 100 Kingdoms of Nans, which was the beginning of today's Qin Kingdom. Is it true?" "Wow. I didn't expect someone would remember this. Lord Dongting sounds a little happier. He moved closer to the fish and smelled it, then continued to roast it on the fire. Yes. At that time, 2,900 years ago, at that time I was still in the transcendent state. But it was enough for me to help people. The ancestor of the Wei Kingdom's royal family was the Taoist that the yellow-clothed woman gave birth to. He came to the secular world, married and had 10 generations. In the 10th generation the Wei Kingdom's royal family came out. Lord Dongting laughed. They originally lived and multiplied in Guanqiu for generations, and later became emperor in Guanqiu. At that time the royal family's surname was different from that of the common people. It was a compound surname to show respect. Since they became emperor in Guanqiu their surname was Shangguan. Nowadays those compound surnames among the people are, in fact, legitimate descendants of the ancient royal family. Li Yunxin frowned slightly. I adored her. Because you loved her you helped her descendants establish the Wei Kingdom? Lord Dongting narrowed his eyes and let out a long sigh. At that time I still knew about it. However, these things could only be used to pass the time for boredom. But there is another matter. The Wei Kingdom had a total of 746 years. Later I got tired of it and cut off this relationship. But after the Wei Kingdom was destroyed, a branch of the Shangguan family remained. After another 97 generations a little girl was born. Lord Dongting looked at Li Yunxin. That little girl was a Dao embryo. She was seen by the Kenzo and was brought to cultivate the Dao. She reached the transcendent state in her 20s and was on par with Ling Kongzi. It was said that she was beautiful, and when the Kenzo investigated she turned out to be a descendant of the Sword Saint. Li Yunxin took a deep breath. So, the girl you met by the stream is the Sword Saint now. Lord Dongting chuckled. That's a small matter. Instead it was said that the genius of the sword sect had met a man. Hey, he's a remnant of the art saint. Who knew that the remnant of the art saint would fall in love with the girl, causing her to betray the Kenzo and elope with him. The man's surname is Li and his name is Chun Feng. As for the girl, her surname is Shangguan and her name is Yu. Li Yunxin was silent and his face was solemn. After a while he chuckled. So, I'm a relative of the two sages? The sword saint's husband is the calligraphy saint now? I've never heard of this before. Relative? Haha. Lord Dongting laughed. Not a relative, but you are the only descendant of the two sages now. As for the two sages, of course no one told you. They turned against each other more than 2,000 years ago and rarely interacted with each other. At that time all the people who knew about it were dead. Who can tell? Li Yunxin's face turned as numb as the girl in yellow. Let's pretend that what you said is true. I won't ask why my parents had such a powerful background and what happened later, but why are you telling me all this? In fact, he did remember a detail. Yesterday in the sky he told Kun Wuzi that his mother was Shangguan Yu. Kun Wuzi was shocked. Now he thought, Kun Wuzi actually talked with him for so long. Did it have anything to do with this? Don't worry, kid. Lord Dongting waved his hand. At this time one side of the grilled fish had been burnt and the taste had become bad. However, Lord Dongting didn't seem to want to turn it over. He said slowly, you only know this, but there's another thing. The other thing is the reason why I didn't kill you. Do you know why I saw the dragon aura in you? Please tell me. Lord Dongting's face became serious. He was silent for a while as if he was seriously sorting out his thoughts and then said, at the bottom of Dongting Lake half of the dragon's soul, the soul of Xinryu, is sealed. After saying this he looked at Li Yunxin's face. He found that Li Yunxin was still calm without any fear or panic. Whether this calmness was fake or not, Lord Dongting liked such a listener. He rarely had a listener. So he continued. 2,000 years ago Xinryu encountered a disaster. So he separated a part of his soul and sealed it at the bottom of Dongting Lake. As for why it was sealed here, it was because you said I was the emperor's son-in-law, but I used those people's thoughts to control the demon. Demons can divide their essence chi and divine soul and combine them into one. How can it be compared to what humans do? I divided my essence and soul, and Xinryu divided his soul, which became the dragon's 9 sons, Qi-wen. When Qi-wen appeared in the world he was a big demon in the mysterious realm, which was comparable to my cultivation at that time. But then Xinryu captured half of his soul and also half of his memory. This half is what you saw today, the Zhang restriction of Dongting. A part of Xinryu's soul was sealed at the bottom of the lake, which is the source of this restriction. Half of Qi Wen's soul and soul guided this source to form a formation. Dragon Qi is the most intimate with Dragon Qi. Qi Wen appeared in the world. It was just a key to the restriction of Dongting. I have been guarding the dragon soul in this Dongting for 2,000 years. 1,000 years ago, Qi Wen was sealed at Wei River. Although I don't know why Xinryu did it, but according to today's situation, Xinryu probably did it to prevent trouble before it happened. He turned his palm and the dragon god token that hatred threw to him appeared. This dragon god token is a part of Xinryu's dragon scale. When Xinryu appeared in the world, he wanted to subdue all the demons in the world, and had a fierce fight with the golden-winged rock. Xinryu lost one scale and the rock lost 3 feathers. This dragon god token is the broken edge of the scale. Hatred said that Xinryu ordered him to remove the restriction and asked me to see him. But how can Xinryu not know how to remove this restriction? Xinryu said that there is dragon sun in this lake, and Qi Wen in Wei River has the other half of dragon Qi. If I have to go out of Dongting, I only need to call Qi Wen and cast a spell. When the 2 Qi collide, the restriction will be removed immediately. He also said that there is another spell which is to combine the power of 2 dragon sun. Can also break the balance of this dragon Qi and suppress this restriction for a short time. However, the effect will not last long. At that time I didn't know what it meant. Well, I know. Lord Dongting straightened up. Hatred said that Xinryu ordered him to leave Dongting. Humph. Why do I need him to save me? There must be something strange about this. He became a little excited. Clouds and mist rose around him again. Now I have sealed this Dongting just in case. But it is still not enough. Hatred forged the dragon order, but this token is real. I haven't seen Xinryu for 2,000 years. Now it seems something big has happened. Therefore, he looked at Li Yunxin. I don't care how you become Qi Wen, but since you are already dragons, I can give this Dongting to you. After that, I will personally go take a look and see just what kind of deity is doing this. Li Yunxin thought carefully about what he just said in his mind. In fact, every single one of his words could be considered earth-shattering. But he still didn't panic and he didn't relax because he really didn't have to worry about his life. He frowned and said in a deep voice, "Because I am Qi Wen now, you believe me and give me the Dongting that you have been guarding for 2,000 years. It is so good that I feel it is dangerous. Of course, it is not only because of this. But there are other things that I can't tell you now." I just said. Lord Dongting finally stopped roasting the fish. He took the scorched fish down from the flame and blew on it. The mist in his mouth wrapped around the fish like thousands of silk threads entangling it. I just said that you thought I was your enemy and spent a lot of effort. Alas, you didn't know that some things were destined. What's more, you don't know that the things you've done, Ben Jun has seen them all. As I saw it, I knew you were the one I was looking for. If you can live well and succeed in the future, you will naturally know the secret. The inhibition of this Dongting is like a needle. Although the needle is sharp, it can stand. I spent many years to erect this needle, so you can enter and exit this Dongting without feeling the inhibition. Just now, I asked Hatred to make a full blow with his dragon Qi to push down this needle. As soon as the balance of the inhibition is disturbed, it will return to the original situation. You can't get in or get out. If this Dongting is like before, even if I do it myself, it will take several years. So you just stay here peacefully. Lord Dongting stands up. He looks at Li Yunxin. Oh, one more thing. Well, Xinryu's spirit is sealed at the bottom of the lake, so there will always be dragon Qi leaking out. Occasionally, some aquatic creatures pass by and get the dragon Qi, then they become big monsters. That's where the white forest comes from. The flood monster that is born because of the dragon Qi, although it has a high realm, it is not rational. It only knows how to chase blood. If you take over this Dongting, you have to be careful. You are good at reading minds. But it doesn't work on them, or they are not demons but just beasts with the supernatural power of demons. You have just entered the real state, I hope you won't lose your life here. You should know that this Dongting is sealed now, so you have nowhere to escape. Think about it. Lord Dongting waved his hand happily. Just now outside, why did I tell you that you shouldn't stay here for long? Li Yunxin realizes something and suddenly stands up. But Lord Dongting doesn't give him a chance to speak. He throws the burnt carp in his hand to Li Yunxin and shouts, "She loves you and misses you. Let's see if you can save her." Li Yunxin is stunned. But he immediately reaches out and firmly grabs the grilled fish. The next moment the burnt grilled fish suddenly expands. It turns into a beautiful woman in black. However, the black clothes on her body were not black clothes, but the burnt material of her clothes. As soon as it meets the wind, it immediately turns into powder, revealing the naked, white, tender and smooth body. It is Red Lady. Li Yunxin holds this smooth body with both hands. Before he can do anything, Lord Dongting has already laughed 3 times and waved his sleeves. The bright sun and blue sky in front of him suddenly disappear without a trace. Li Yunxin falls back into the dark and gloomy lake thousands of meters below with Red Lady in his arms. He immediately glances at the side. He is still at the place where he saw the red flower just now. But the red flower has disappeared. The woman in yellow is thrown out together with the 2 of them. In just a moment she is pressed into a blood mist by the deep water. She wasn't the only one. Not far away, a bloody mist that looked like a giant firework had also appeared. Li Yunxin once saw Ling Kongzi and Mu Yun above Dongting. He immediately realizes that the large blood mist is those white and fat people. Lord Dongting is really gone. He takes away his palace and throws out all the people he doesn't want to stay inside. If that was the case, then Lu Ling would definitely be in the water. Li Yunxin glances at the unconscious Red Lady in his arms and finally has time to say the words in his heart. Motherf * King Old Pervert. Lord Dongting now imprisons him in this Dongting Lake, and uses him as a laborer to kill those flood dragons. This monster looks kind, but how can he really let people take advantage of him? As soon as this idea comes to Li Yunxin, he hasn't decided whether to wake up Red Lady or go to find Lu Ling first. At this moment he hears a muffled roar coming from the deep lake in the distance. A huge, ferocious, hornless dragon head, with a long and thick body behind it rushes at him. This newborn flood dragon pounces straight down from the white forest. Its body is as big as Li Yunxin's real body of the realm of truth. It is even bigger. But it also seems to be afraid of those towering skeletons. It only passes through the forest and doesn't dare to rush around. If not, the roar just now would have swallowed Li Yunxin and Red Lady. Li Yunxin sighs. He only glances at the evil flood dragon and then turns around and runs away. Chapter 205. But even though it escaped, it only circled around in the white forest. The dragon's skeleton, which had been preserved for thousands of years, was not ordinary material. When Li Yunxin passed by the skeleton with the unconscious Red Lady in his arms, he tested it. Its hardness and toughness were amazing. It was no wonder that even though the evil flood dragon was savage and slow-witted, it still knew how to dodge. It must have suffered in this white forest before. On one hand he wanted to avoid the evil dragon, and on the other hand he wanted to find Ling Kongzi, who might have also been thrown into the water. Ling Kongzi's body was already a bag of skin, and her soul was hidden in the soul-calming bell. If it was a person, although it was dim in the water, there would still be things of different sizes, so it would be easier to find. But although her bag of skin had been tempered, it no longer had any spiritual power. It was hard to say whether it could withstand the pressure of the thousands of meters deep water. If her body was crushed and only the bell was left, it would really be like looking for a needle in a haystack. He lured the dragon around a few times in the white forest. The evil dragon knew that it could not catch up with this cunning little thing, so it jumped out of the forest and followed Li Yunxin in the water above. Lord Dongting said that this dragon was cruel and stupid, but it was actually an exaggeration. Although they were not as smart and astute as big demons and humans, they were born of dragon chi and had the instinct of beasts. In terms of intelligence they were roughly the same as adult cats and dogs, or even slightly better. This dragon was a dark giant beast. There were no scales on the surface of its body but slippery tough skin. There were white spots scattered on the skin, as if the creator had accidentally sprinkled a few spots of titanium white on it when dyeing it. It also had no claws, only a hornless dragon head. It gradually realized that the little thing in the forest was looking for something, and its dizzy brain had a dizzy idea. Seeing where Li Yunxin was going, it spat out a mouthful of thick ink-like water, dyeing the water so dark that he could not see it. It chased after Li Yunxin like this for a while and gradually felt bored. He roared for a while more, leaped into the forest a few times, then turned around and swam off to who knows where. At this time, Li Yunxin put down the unconscious Red Lady, on a thick rib that extended from the spine. Based on his eyesight, he couldn't find Ling Kongzi's body after going around for a long time. It must have been crushed. The bell that carried her soul was nowhere to be seen. She must have fallen into the water. She had lost her physical body, but her soul was protected by the magic treasure, so she could still feel it. If such a sentient soul was buried in the mud at the bottom of the lake for a few years, a dozen years, or even hundreds or thousands of years, what kind of terrifying situation would it be? Even though Li Yunxin wasn't a kind person, he was still shocked when he thought of this. If he were to fall into such a situation one day, he would rather die. He put Red Madam down and took out his folding fan from the bottom of the water. Naturally, his fan was not an ordinary item. It wouldn't get wet even if it got wet. Then he stared at Red Lady's body for a while. This carp spirit must have spent a lot of effort when she transformed into a human form. Her body was exquisite, indeed worthy of a beauty's praise. But Li Yunxin wasn't too interested in these things. He was born with a good body in both his previous and current lives. He had never experienced the feeling of being crazy and heartbroken for one or a few women. But it often made other people sigh sorrowfully. If you didn't spend a lot of effort, you wouldn't cherish it. He was tired of a lot of things, and those feelings were brought to this life. But in this life, in spite of the memories of the past and the thoughts of the past, there was still a body that was growing. Based on his previous life's knowledge, he knew that a lot of times, the material also determined the spirit. His body was full of vitality. How could he say that he didn't have any romantic thoughts? That wasn't realistic. The first time he saw Qiao Jiesin, he had a good impression of her. It was hard to say whether it was a physiological impulse playing tricks. For ordinary people, this was a good thing to enjoy. But for him, this was a weakness and an Achilles heel. So he chose to abandon his original body and transform into this dragon body. Although she still looked like the Li Yunxin of the past with human organs and meridians, she was completely different from a teenager who was in heat at the age of 14 or 15. So he looked at Red Lady's body for a long time and breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't feel anything at all. It wasn't that he lost some kind of ability. In fact, sometimes he felt that he was walking on the Great Tao alone with a feeling of solitude. But solitude was spiritual and had nothing to do with physical desires. Sometimes he wished that there was someone. It didn't matter if it was a man or a woman, old or young, beautiful or ugly, good or evil, that he could get along with freely. It was easy to get along with Lu Laodao. But it wasn't the kind of feeling he wanted. What Li Yunxin wanted, to use the words of his previous world, to put it in a more artistic and pretentious way, then they were soulmates. Highly compatible with his soul and thoughts, he wanted such a person. Before meeting such a person, he would never mistreat himself. He talked to himself like this in his heart, and finally his eyes fell on his folding fan. After entering Red Flower City, he realized that there could be such a wide space inside, instead of a narrow place that might make him go crazy. In the past, because of some secret and personal reasons, he had never set foot in it, but now he was going to explore it. In such a dangerous and strange environment, using his own temporary imperial residence as a residence was indeed a wise choice. But even today, Li Yunxin still felt that this thing was very strange. It was a strange feeling that was incompatible with the real world. There were immortals and demons in this world, but they were all evolved from the people and animals of this world. But the so-called temporary imperial residence and dragon palace, you said it was a magical power? But it gave him a different feeling than any other magical power. This was one of the reasons why he treated this thing carefully before. But now that the opportunity had come, Li Yunxin took a deep breath, held up Red Lady and put it into his folding fan for the first time. Lord Dongting's palace looked almost the size of Dongting. Li Yunxin didn't know if he could reach all the places he could see at that time, but at least he didn't see any obvious boundary. And he thought that since he was in the real realm, he should have a dragon palace. Since it was a dragon palace, although it was not magnificent, at least, it was passable. But what he saw in front of him was not what he thought. There was a vast expanse of whiteness between heaven and earth. He couldn't tell up from down, left from right, and he couldn't see the boundary. In this vast chaos, some things were floating. Half a basket of green plums, a pot of wine, a dozen ghosts with dull faces, 2 books, half a sugar man, a thin sword. In short, the small things that Li Yunxin put into the folding fan before were now floating in this fog. He used to take things out of the folding fan just like a person taking things out of his pocket. He could always feel it with his wakin or his hand. So he just grabbed it and took it out. He didn't know what it looked like in his pocket. Li Yunxin used to know that there was a space in the temporary imperial residence, but he didn't see the real appearance until today. Now that he saw it clearly, he had doubts in his heart. The appearance of the temporary imperial residence didn't completely follow the master's wishes, but directly reflected the most important thing in his heart, or the most unique characteristic. No one told him such things, so he could only slowly ponder and guess by himself. Then the appearance of the temporary imperial residence probably didn't completely follow his wishes, at least not at the beginning. But in any case, he was not a heartless person, so why did it look like this inside? He sighed and planned to try to make some changes. But at this moment he heard a soft exhalation. Li Yunxin looked down. He first saw the snow-white and delicate skin, then the flat collarbone. Then he saw Red Lady's face. He didn't know when she opened her eyes and looked at him. The two looked at each other in silence for a while. As soon as Li Yunxin loosened his hand, Red Lady floated in the white chaos. The next moment, a red light flashed on her body, and she had a set of red clothes that she wore when they first met on the night of Minghan. He was silent for a while and said, "Lord Dongting may have left Dongting. Before he left, he threw you to me." Red Lady didn't speak but just looked at him blankly. Li Yunxin coughed. "Earlier he was roasting you with a branch. I didn't know it was you at that time because I really couldn't feel whacken. If it was not just domestic violence but because of what I did before. It's not because of you." Red Lady finally spoke. Her voice was not as calm as she looked. Compared with Li Yunxin's tone, her words were more emotional. "But I am still very happy. You came to Dongting." Li Yunxin was a little stunned and frowned. "I have my own business." But he was interrupted by Red Lady. The fish monster didn't seem to care about his explanation at all. "It's not what you think. Although my father..." Alas. But in fact the branch he saw was the branch of Jianmu. That fire was his crimson tail fire. "I am a ghost cultivator with Yin spirit, so I am always afraid of the red yang qi. My father refined the branch of Jianmu into my body and mixed it with her red tail fire. In this way, although I am a ghost cultivator, I am not afraid of those things. But in your eyes, alas. You were killed by him first and became a ghost cultivator. Then you suffered so much and stayed with me. Did he take away all the shrimp soldiers and crab generals in the palace?" Li Yunxin sighed. "He actually said, it was for your own good." Red Lady was silent for a while in this white chaos, and a smile appeared on her lips. But even Li Yunxin couldn't see whether she was a little bitter or not. "How can I see his sincerity and hypocrisy? You said you loved me before, but it turned out that you lied to me. You said you lied to me, but now you came to Dongting in person." Li Lang could be said to have no choice, and he could be said to have come for the sake of Ling Kongzi. "But how can I know that you're not sincere even though you're pretending?" "But you don't have to defend yourself. You don't know if something is true or not even if you say it, so it's better not to say it. Living in this world, no matter how you live, is nothing more than coaxing others to deceive yourself with you." Saying this, Red Madam slowly smiled. But she still stood there obediently. Li Yunxin listened quietly. After a moment of silence, she furrowed her brows. "You are doing a very dangerous thing," he said in a deep voice. Starting with such a sentence, he felt that he could finally recover his calmness. "I am a person who is cold by nature. I don't know what it means to be good to others, and it is difficult for me to give appropriate feedback to others' kindness. Some people like to receive kindness and gratitude from others from the bottom of their hearts. But for people like me, being treated kindly by others will make me feel uneasy. This feeling of uneasiness and awkwardness makes me feel both psychological and physical discomfort, so I don't like making friends with others very much. Not to mention your stupid kindness. If I treat you well one day, it means that I must have something to ask of you. You have learned your lesson last time. This time, if you still think that I treat you well, have you in my heart, and come to Dongting to save you because of my conscience, then you should be careful." Li Yunxin looked at her. "I will use any possible means to eliminate the threats around me and the factors that make me feel uncomfortable. Even if you really stay in my heart, it means that you have become a doom. If I want to pass the doom, the method is simple. I will make a trap so that you don't know it. When you die, you will still cry happiness. Now let me tell you. You think that your father did something good to you and kept you here. You also think that I may still have a place for you in my heart and come for you. But the reality is, your father once again treats you as a tool. He treats you cruelly and tries to arouse my pity. Then he leaves you here and wants you to become a chess piece again. And I appear here. I do want to come to you after everything is done. But I come to you just to say the following words to you. If I were you, I would stay away from people like me. The pain I give you will be 100 times greater than the possible happiness I can give you. I will send you to Mount June in a moment. Although this Dongting has been sealed, it is so big. You can always have a place to go. Don't show up in front of me again. Red Lady looked at Li Yunxin and didn't speak. After a while she finally frowned and sighed. How can you even say such words? In order to, not to make me sad and regret in the future, you actually humiliate yourself like this? Li Yunxin stopped talking and turned around to leave his dragon palace. But Red Lady said softly, Okay, I won't say it anymore. But you can't drive me away. There is a reason for me to stay in Dongting. If I leave you can't do something. Li Yunxin had turned around and turned his back to her. After a while he asked, In this Dongting, is there anything you can do but I can't? Red Lady let out a sigh gently. Then she said, Have you seen the flood dragon in the lake, my dear? Yes. I also heard from my father that Bai Yunxin plotted to kill Ling Kongzi because the adopted daughter of Golden Rock mistakenly thought that Ling Kongzi killed you and the 9th young master. Do you know why? Li Yunxin frowned. What do you mean why? This is my plot. I certainly know why. Hey my dear. Li darling. Red Madam smiled and sighed. That Bai Yunxin said that she likes to eat dragons. But the 9th young master is just a monster in the transcendent state. Wouldn't it be easy for Bai Yunxin to catch him? Why didn't she really eat him for 1,000 years? Have you ever thought about it? Chapter 206. Then tell me. He still doesn't turn around, but it's not convenient for him to leave. Red Lady steps on the chaos under her feet and walks to him slowly. She stroked Li Yunxin's chest with a finger and said, Li darling, think about it again. The 9th young master has lived in Weishui River for 1,000 years. How can Bai Yunxin not know that? But why did he run away a few days ago? Afraid that Bai Yunxin would chase after him. In fact, this question has always been in Li Yunxin's mind. On a rainy night when he first met the 9th young master in the ruined temple, he seemed to be hiding from someone. He used the incense table in the temple to make a fire and roasted the body of the Taoist of Lingshu Sword School. In the middle of eating, he heard the noise in the sky and ran away in panic. Later he thinks that he should be hiding from Bai Yunxin at that time. In the past, Li Yunxin thought that Bai Yunxin didn't eat the 9th young master because both of them had backers. The 9th young master is the son of Xinryu, and Bai Yunxin is the adopted daughter of Golden Winged Rock. Xinryu is the common lord of demons and monsters in the world, while Golden Rock is the common lord of the feather race in the world. But later he knows that at least, it seems, that the 9th young master is not in power. His position in front of Xinryu is far lower than that of Bai Yunxin. Moreover, neither of them seemed like the kind of people who would play the game of chasing, running and switching to the other person when they caught up to them. So something happened during that time. And those things are related to me in Dongting in the future? Of course. You are so smart. Red Lady says with a smile. It is said that the Golden Winged Rock likes to eat dragons. But how many dragons are there in the world? 1 Xinryu and 9 dragon sons. How can he like to eat? But this kind of thing can't be a rumor. If it is a rumor, Xinryu, as the common lord of demons and monsters in the world, will not allow this kind of nonsense to spread. So, it's this evil Jiao. Li Yunxin sighed in a low voice. So the legendary Golden Winged Rock that likes to eat dragons is actually referring to this evil dragon? Exactly. Bai Yunxin said that she was traveling the world, but she was actually looking for food for her adoptive father. The 9th young master was the one who handed over to her, and I was the one who handed over to the 9th young master. Li Lang could think about it. Where did the flesh and blood of the thousands of skeletons in the lake go? If we let them rot slowly, can we still stay in Dongting? The truth was rather shocking. Eating the flesh and blood of the evil flood dragon was not shocking. All he said was, this evil Jiao was born because a part of Xinryu's soul leaked out and contaminated the water creatures at the bottom of the lake. Li Yunxin felt that something was amiss. In other words, although they're not real dragons, they're still dragons. If Xinryu knew that the Golden Winged Rock was eating this thing, unless he was a coward, how could he not be angry? But your father, my father said that it was approved by Xinryu. The ninth young master didn't know about it and thought that I was hiding it from my father. But in fact he knew everything. Li Lang, what are you worried about? Red Madam rolled her eyes and comforted him. You don't have to worry. My father said that probably because Xinryu suffered a disaster and its strength was greatly damaged, so it used this method to win over the King Rock to deter the demons. Bai Yunxin pursued the ninth young master before because the evil Jiao was born late this year. The golden-winged rock was impatient, so Bai Yunxin was impatient too. She said that she might as well catch the ninth young master and give him to her adoptive father. I'm not very clear about the details, but Li Lang, now that Dongting is sealed, there's no Jiao meat to give to Bai Yunxin. Li Lang, have you thought of any way? At this time, Li Yunxin has no idea what kind of existence Lord Dongting is to him. The ninth young master claimed to be his friend, but Li Yunxin only wanted to kill him. He didn't want to have a friend who might kill him at any time. He could talk to Kun Wuxia in a friendly way, but that was only because of the situation. Once the conditions were right, he would kill Kun Wuxia without even blinking his eyes. Only this Lord Dongting. Li Yunxin really didn't know what kind of existence this 3,000-year-old big demon was. Every time he thought he was going to kill him, he would get something from him. And every time he thought he could be a friend, at least not an enemy, he would be tricked by him. Now that he was trapped in Dongting and knew these things, he didn't understand the meaning of the old demon at all. If what Lord Dongting said was true, then it meant that his bloodline was nobler than anyone else in this world. The emperors and the royal family in the human world had noble bloodlines. More than one country's royal family would worship the two sages, and only their portraits. The emperors who had millions of people couldn't even see the two sages' faces when they were alive. The kingdom of Qing wasn't a small country, but if Ling Kongzi went to the capital, he could also receive the courtesy of the emperor. This was not only because the cultivators had unimaginable power, but also because Daotong and Kenzo had the power to control the world. Now Lord Dongting told him that the master of calligraphy and the master of sword had a son when they were young, but they didn't have any more children. That son entered the secular world and gave birth to descendants. Then the kingdom of ancient Wei was established for more than 2,000 years, and it had many branches. Then the kingdom of Wei was destroyed and only one branch of the Shangguan family survived. In fact, from a long time ago, the two sages probably didn't care about the so-called kinship anymore. 1, 2, 3, 4, or even more generations they might still care about it. However, after thousands of years, such kinship seemed to have no meaning to anyone. The Shangguan family had been the royal family for hundreds of years. Other than the direct line of descent, they must have left behind countless descendants in the world. If they were only related by blood to the descendants of the two sages, there would probably be millions of mouths in the world. However, Li Yunxin's mother, Shangguanyu, returned to Daotong after nearly 3,000 years. This was what cultivators often talked about as the fruit of fate. Because of this fruit of fate, the thin bloodline of the two sages in her body finally had a real meaning. And when it came to Li Yunxin, it also had a meaning. Lord Dongting helped the Shangguan family establish the kingdom of ancient Wei because of the grace of the Master of Swords' guidance before he achieved enlightenment. But Li Yunxin didn't believe that after more than 2,700 years, this big demon would suddenly think of that love and decide to help him again. His mother, Shangguanyu, had eloped with the art saint's remnant with the all-seeing jade slip and lived in seclusion for more than 10 years. But now, small fries from the Freemasonry and the Lingshu sword sect suddenly came to stir up trouble. With all these things mixed together, Li Yunxin realized that he seemed to have fallen into a huge whirlpool. At least it was no longer the plot of a mountain village youth facing a crisis and struggling to survive alone. He sighed slightly in his heart. This should be what the real world should be like. To survive from such a dangerous experience, there must be someone else helping or restraining him. For example, when he first came to the city of Wei, someone did something to Inspector Yin. He didn't care that Inspector Yin sent someone to investigate his past, because it would take more than a day to investigate, and by that time he had already done what he wanted to do. But he didn't expect that an experienced person like Inspector Yin would quickly come to a practical conclusion. He even found out where his family lived. Of course, it was wrong information. This meant that someone was helping him. Therefore, in everything that Li Yunxin did after that, he intentionally or unintentionally left some loopholes or leeway so that one or several forces hiding in the dark could have a chance to infiltrate. But the problem was, they seemed to disappear. Now, when Red Madam asked him what he should do, Li Yunxin was silent for a long time and didn't speak. He didn't mean to hold back, but he really didn't know what to do. There were too many pieces of information, too many clues and no clue. Because of so many things, he was at a loss. It was as if he had returned to the days when he first came to the city of Wei. He sighed, "There's nothing I can do. Help me find Ling Kongzi first." This was a key figure that he had overlooked. Ling Kongzi had met the two sages before he went down the mountain. It was not an ordinary thing. Li Yunxin didn't know his background before. He only thought that what the two sages told him was the internal secret of Daotong, which was related to how to get the translucent jade slip. But now he realized that it might also be related to him. At this moment, Red Madam's face suddenly changed. "Li, there are people outside," she said in a low but serious voice. The Red Madam, who was infatuated with talent, had become a completely different person. "They are fighting near Dongting and they have triggered the inhibition of Dongting." Before Li Yunxin asked, Red Madam had already said, "My father refined the Jianmu into my body. I can feel it. You can't leave me." Li Yunxin sighed and said, "All right. Let's go and have a look." He thought that the people fighting were probably the doppelgangers of Hatred and Kun Wuzi. The Taoist of the Langya cave abode followed Hatred here. Now the Lord Dongting didn't care about it. Besides, he had been fooled by him before, so he was very angry. It would be strange if he didn't find someone to vent his anger on. But after diving at the bottom of the lake for a quarter of an hour, he realized that he was wrong when he came to the surface of the lake. It was still night. It had only been 2 or 3 hours since the Lord Dongting took him to the bottom of the lake. The place where he came out of the water was in the center of Dongting. Looking around, it was vast and misty. He couldn't even see the hills and the horizon. On the top of the sky, there were the moon and stars, as if two people were in the sea. If he ignored the light on the east bank, that was the light. Other places were dark horizontal lines. There were clouds at the intersection of the water and the night sky. The boundary was still clear. But the eastern part was bright. The sky was also slightly yellow, as if the setting sun was still hidden behind the distant mountains. Li Yunxin only needed a glance to realize that it was only the length of a finger from where she was standing. But in fact, it should be more than a kilometer long. On the east bank of Dongting, a kilometer-long area was on fire at this time. He had seen this scene when Ling Kongzi and Bai Yunxin fought. "Let's go and see." He frowned and gently breathed. He only said 3 words. The city of Wei was also on the east bank of Dongting. Red Lady didn't say anything. It seemed that she didn't expect this scene either. She waved her hand and called out the Yi Bai jade boat. Li Yunxin stepped on the bow of the boat. Driven by Wacken, the magic weapon shot to the east bank like an arrow. It was even faster than Li Yunxin's real body on the water. In just a quarter of an hour, the outline of the east bank gradually became clear in front of him. It was indeed on fire. Yesterday afternoon, Li Yunxin rained heavily and the surrounding land was soaked. In the evening, Kun Wuzi overturned Dongting again. The splashing waves even destroyed the surrounding trees and buildings. The land became a piece of mud. However, this piece of land was now ablaze with raging flames. The fire seemed to be burning the soil and water in the mud. It rose more than 10 meters high on the open ground. When Li Yunxin and Red Lady drove the Yi Bai jade boat closer, they felt a terrible firewall coming to them. It even covered the sky. But the inhibition of Dongting had worked after all. At this time, Li Yunxin could see what it looked like. It was like a huge cover. An inverted semicircular cover surrounded Dongting. The firewall was surging on the shore, but it could only stick to the invisible inhibition and burn. The heat could get in, but the fire couldn't. Li Yunxin and Red Lady looked at each other. They realized that such a momentum might not be made by Hatred and Kun Wuzi. Hatred was not an idiot. How could he fight with the doppelganger of Kun Wuzi's soul at this time? But other than that, I don't know what happened to the city of Wei. Li Yunxin looked at the firewall in front of him and sighed. I still have a few helpers and a friend outside. Now I am trapped here and they... He didn't finish his words. He and Red Lady's Yi Bai jade boat were hit away at the same time. The indescribable great power suddenly came. The last thing Li Yunxin saw was that in the overwhelming fire, the invisible barrier of Dongting seemed to be hit by an invisible giant fist. The power was so great that the barrier was like a real thing with shape and substance. It was dented inwardly by a tiny arc. And this tiny, was only relative to the entire inhibition of Dongting. But in Li Yunxin's place, it was the fire on the other shore that rushed over, stirring up a terrible impact. The impact immediately blew away the two unprepared people. Even the water in the lake was set off a huge wave of more than 10 meters high. In the blink of an eye, Red Lady's figure disappeared. No one knew where she was sent flying to. But Li Yunxin saw the last scene before his sight was blocked by the wave. This impact didn't seem to be aimed at him and Red Lady. He saw a huge figure, almost as long as his real body, but it was the height of a human figure. It hit the inhibition of Dongting. It seemed that it was blown back by a terrible blow and hit the barrier. However, it was not the first time. At that moment, when the human figure touched the barrier and moved awkwardly, before it could make an effective counterattack, at least hundreds of attacks came again. Due to the continuous bombardment, the human figure trembled. His trembling formed a terrifying shockwave within the barrier. That was to say, it was unknown who was fighting with the gigantic humanoid, but just the shockwaves were enough to send a great demon at the true realm flying. What kind of a great demon is this? This was the first thought in Li Yunxin's mind at that time. Chapter 207. But he didn't want to escape like Red Lady. No matter how big the wave was, it was still a wave. Two Yin God realm demons with relatively high cultivation were sent flying by this thing. How was that supposed to work? Presumably, Red Lady also felt shocked in her heart. Borrowing the momentum of being sent flying, she dived into the water. But Li Yunxin didn't want to hide. First, he felt that the people outside the restriction might have come because of him. Second, how could he lose his momentum because of this? When he was flying in the air, he roared angrily, and his body immediately emitted a weeping golden light. A few strands of the white mane that only appeared when he transformed into a demon god appeared on his temples, and fine small scales appeared on his cheeks. He released the power of the divine beast in his body to a certain extent, so that his body became stronger, and at the same time he retained the meridians of a human sea of qi. Could be considered as a way to attack and defend. With a loud bang, he broke through the monstrous wave and reappeared by the lake with a large amount of water, mist and light. From the time he was submerged to the moment he re-emerged from the water, only a short period of 2 breaths had passed. But the battle on the shore seemed to have come to an end. The raging flames were still burning, but the huge human figure had disappeared. But if one looked carefully, one would find that there were some changes in the flames. It was as if there were many little flaming birds flying in the flames. Their dark red bodies and orange feathers, if one didn't pay attention, one would think that they were cyclones in the flames. Innumerable little birds flew up and down, chasing even smaller human figures. Just now, Li Yunxin only saw the size of the human figure, but didn't see its appearance clearly. But now, looking at those little people again, he vaguely felt that they were the adults just now, just that they were scattered. They split into thousands of people in the flames and fled in all directions. But the wall of fire at this time seemed to have become a cage. The little people in the fire roared, and their figures gradually became thinner. Those who were not agile were caught by the birds, and with a peck or a tilt of the neck, the little people were eaten into their stomachs. The flames burned silently, climbing up the restriction barrier in front of Li Yunxin. Other than that, there was no other sound. After half an hour, the densely packed human figures in the fire were finally eaten up by the birds. The last human figure fled to the edge of the flames. Countless firebirds blotted out the sky and swallowed it whole. At this moment, the little man finally made a sound. The sound did not match his figure. It was low and hoarse, but it was like a great bell. The ground trembled slightly. "One day I will," but his voice was quickly drowned out by the flock of birds. 2 breaths later, the last figure disappeared. Li Yunxin's heart skipped a beat. That figure called himself Zhen. He did not know which emperor it was. After another quarter of an hour, the flames also dissipated. It was still nighttime. As the intensity of the fire decreased, the howling wind in the air also gradually disappeared. She hears the sound of waves in Dongting again. There were stars and a moon in the sky, and in front of him, the receding flames parted in the middle, like 2 bright, gorgeous curtains drawn slowly to either side. The exposed ground had already been burned dry by the fire, and faint white smoke was rising from it. A few people were standing on the ground. Their cheeks were reflected warm yellow by the flame curtains on both sides, but their backs were coated with a layer of cold light by the stars and the moon. Against the silent and dark mountains and forests in the distance, the bright fire on both sides, they just looked at Li Yunxin. After a few breaths, the flames completely dissipated. Those birds that were originally flying in the fire joined together and went straight into the palm of the first person. He was not afraid of the high temperature at all. He shook a figure in his hand and the firebirds were collected in it. Finally, they turned into a strange and mysterious character. Li Yunxin did not recognize the character. It should be the true rune of Dao Tong. But Li Yunxin recognized that person. It was Kun Wuxi. And he realized that if he guessed right, this should be the original body of Kun Wuxi, not the real body of his soul. The original body of Kun Wuxi did not come alone. Behind him were 7 Taoists in different clothes. But they all had one thing in common: they looked at Li Yunxin like looking at a corpse. After staring at him for a while, Kun Wuxi said, "Open the inhibition and hand over Dong Ting." Li Yunxin stood on the waves and looked behind him. The direction of the city of Wei was the same as usual. There was nothing unusual. There was no one behind them. He spread his hands. "I can't open it. I also want to go out. Where are my people?" "Your people?" The Taoist in the Xianjing realm smiled coldly. "I heard that you had some demons under your command, but they all scattered and disappeared. There was also a Taoist who escaped with those demons. There is a ghost emperor in the city of Wei. Do you know who I just killed?" Li Yunxin was silent for a while and raised his head. "Oh, so you killed Emperor Li? Anyway, it can't be that Emperor Yi. Look at how arrogant you are now. You don't need to make a big fuss to kill him." Kun Wuxi smiled slightly. Emperor Li killed several cultivators of Dao Tong, but he fled to the direction of the city of Wei. I was there and so were my disciples. That's why we ran into each other. It's a pity that you used to be in the state of Taishang Wang Qing, but now you are only in the state of Shi Xianjing. So I killed him. Took me a lot of effort to kill him. If it wasn't for this thing, I wouldn't have let you enter Dongting so easily. Now, Li Yunxin, hand over Dongting. You have a relationship with the 2 saints. Although you are a demon, it doesn't mean you can't enter Dao Tong. This Taoist isn't that Ling Kongzi. This Taoist's words are valid once spoken. The 7 Taoists behind him didn't say anything, but their faces didn't look good. It seemed that they couldn't bear to see this head of the Langya cave talking to a demon so amiably. Li Yunxin was silent for a while after listening to him. Then he frowned. "Are we going to fight?" After saying this, Kun Wuxi looked normal, but the faces of the 7 Taoists behind him changed instantly. It seemed that he told the truth that was regarded as a big secret by those people, and they didn't know how Li Yunxin knew it. Because of this great surprise, one of them couldn't help but shout, "How did you know this? Tell me, are you really in cahoots with those demons?" The age of the person who spoke couldn't be seen. He looked like a middle-aged man. He had 3 strands of short beard, thin lips, and always pursed, which made him look arrogant and unruly. He was tall, even half a head taller than Kun Wuxi. At this moment he stared at Li Yunxin angrily, but the look in his eyes was a little strange. It was not exactly the disgust when facing demons and enemies. At the same time there was a trace of soft emotion, disappointment. However, Li Yunxin didn't know when he met this guy and when he made him have any expectation on him. He glanced at the man and sighed. "Is it that hard to guess? Since you all came to the city of Wei and Dongting one after another, you probably know that some of the souls of Shinryu are sealed in this Dongting. Now you can't wait to take this Dongting by force. You even helped me to reveal the name of Lord Dongting. I think you were thinking about this place at that time. You even thought about Shinryu. If you didn't want to fight, why would you do such a sensitive thing?" Before Kun Wuxi said anything, that person interrupted again. "You actually know that there are souls of Shinryu in this Dongting. You are indeed. Oh, hey, you actually chose this path. Why don't you be a human but a demon?" Li Yunxin frowned and looked at him for a while and then looked at Kun Wuxi. He spread out his hands and tilted his head. It turned out that body language seemed to be effective everywhere. Kun Wuxi understood Li Yunxin's meaning. He coughed and glanced at the person next to him, Tongji. It turned out that the person was called Tongji. However, Kun Wuxi's reminder didn't seem to have any effect. The Taoist who said Tongji was still a little excited. The 6 people around him all looked at him differently, but it was still a strange look. Was that sympathy? Tongji snorted and looked at Li Yunxin. "Look at I. So that you know, Ai's Taoist name is Yuchenzi. Back then your mother was abducted by a heretical cultivator. She stubbornly refused to come to her senses and gave birth to you. Now, although she has unfortunately passed away on account that I once had a relationship with her, this has become a result of fate for me. I just didn't expect that you and your humph, you are also a heretical cultivator. How can you not be a human? Your body, hair and skin were given to you by your parents. Your mother was pregnant for 10 months and gave birth to your good body. Did she ask you to abandon her body? Now, immediately unlock the inhibition of Dongting and tell the Great Master everything you know. If you tell me everything and reflect on your past sins, then I will remember your mother's love and guarantee that you will lose your Taoist power and cultivate the Tao again in my Langya cave abode. I can also use this monster body to atone for you and your mother's sins to Dao Tong and Kenzo. Isn't it better to be a clean person? Li Yunxin listened to him in surprise and finally couldn't help but ask Kun Wuzi, "Who the hell is this idiot?" Yuchenzi was furious immediately. Kun Wuzi sighed and shouted in a low voice, "Enough. How long do you want to make trouble?" Originally, when these 8 people appeared, they were accompanied by flames and darkness. In Li Yunxin's eyes they were really cool. Kun Wuzi came in person and the 7 people behind him seemed to have their own supernatural powers. They just stood there and didn't say anything, just looking at him coldly. It was a great deterrent. However, after hearing Yuchenzi's words, the other 6 people also came to persuade him. They tried to calm him down and not be rude in front of the Great Master. There were also some who persuaded him and looked at Li Yunxin with slight disgust. For a moment, the imposing manner of a master cultivator was all gone. Instead, it became a family gossip in the market. However, it could also be seen that the 7 people behind Kun Wuzi had a good relationship with each other. This should be an anomaly in the world of cultivation. He originally thought that the cultivators of Dao Tong and Kenzo should be cold and heartless. After all, they had to go through the trials. But now it seemed that they were like brothers. Maybe there was some other inside story. When Kun Wuzi saw him staring at the 7 people, he frowned. They are the Langya 7 under eye. This Tongji was originally acquainted with your mother, Shangguan Yu. Then tell him to control his mouth. Li Yunxin frowned. And pay attention to your own intelligence. When Yuchenzi heard this, he was stunned at first. Then he widened his eyes. Even his 6 brothers couldn't stop him. He shouted, "You little brat. Do you know that your mother was originally going to become my Dao companion? If it wasn't for that demon. I'm so angry. Now you are actually so stubborn. In the future I will definitely teach you a lesson and let you know that you and your father." Seeing that his words were getting more and more ridiculous, Kun Wuzi directly waved his sleeve. Yuchenzi could only open his mouth but no sound could be heard. He thought for a while and said, "The matter between him and your mother is complicated. There is a reason for his attitude. However, the reason why I brought his clone here is to let you know that I's previous promise wasn't empty nonsense. Perhaps you already know, or perhaps you don't know enough. Your mother, Shangguan Yu, is the descendant of the 2 saints and you are also the descendant of the 2 saints. The attitude of Dao Tong and Kenzo towards you is the attitude of Yuchenzi towards you. They mourn your misfortune and are angry at your incompetence. If you were a good person, no one would want to become a demon. I also slightly understood some things. Previously, you told my clone that there was another faction that was causing trouble and wanted to stir up a storm in the world. The failure of your parents was probably the tragedy caused by that force. And because of that tragedy, you, a young man, were forced to do some wrong things in order to survive alone. You killed some people you shouldn't have killed and then you made such a choice. I have already said that it's all because of one word. I had no choice. If it was someone else, even if the 4 of them were involved, it would still be very difficult to forgive. But after all, you have the blood of the 2 saints. We cultivators don't pay much attention to bloodline and emotion. However, now that this matter is in front of us, it is also bloodline and also fate. So, I told you to remove the inhibition and hand over Dongting. Then go back to the mountain with I. If you want to disperse your personal ability, disperse it and cultivate the Tao again. If you don't want to disperse it, you can also become a demon. After all, you were a human before. Demons are demons after all. Standing with them, you can't really understand the joy of being a human. Speaking of suitable, Dao Tong is more suitable for you. Li Yunxin, you have also seen a lot of storms. Although you are young, you are more mature and prudent than many people I have met. Think about it. Let go of your emotions and think about it. Do you want to be a demon or a human? It is said that being a demon is free and unfettered. But when a demon walks in the world, he must always be on guard against being stared at by the masters of Dao Tong. If you show your original form, it will make people panic. It's okay to be a natural demon, but you have been a human for 14 years. Can you really stand such a life? You have to know that the choice you make now will affect hundreds or even thousands of years in the future. Now, because of the bloodline of the two saints, I sincerely tell you one thing. Kun Wuzi sighs softly and looks at Li Yunxing with clear eyes. Come back. Li Yunxing listens to him seriously and also sighs. To be honest, he is indeed tempted. Chapter 208. He was tempted. He wanted to use Kun Wuzi's emotions to set up another trap. Any slightly strong emotion would be an obvious flaw for him, but there were two problems. He didn't know whether what Kun Wuzi said was true or not. He had seen too many situations that sounded sincere, but the truth might not be like this. Besides, the other party was no longer the governor, no longer Ling Kongzi, no longer Yunzi. Not a single individual with limited information, and he was no longer the Li Yunxin hidden in the thick fog. The other party was almost the entire Dao Tong, and his ability to obtain information was amazing. In this aspect he had almost no advantage. The other party still had the strength to completely crush him, and violence couldn't solve the problem completely. Therefore, for a long time to come he probably wouldn't have the advantage of asymmetric information, unless he could get more secrets. He believed that Black Bai Yanjun, Lord Dongting, and the Freemasonry were all hiding great secrets. But he still needed time. At the moment he wasn't strong enough to become a third party, so a choice that he wasn't very willing to face was placed in front of him. To turn to the demons or to turn to Dao Tong. Dao Tong could be considered the official of this world. But because of some experiences in his previous life, he had a natural sense of discomfort towards all authority and official. These two words might not necessarily have a negative meaning, but dislike didn't need any reason. Moreover, it was Dao Tong and Kenzo who made things difficult for him, and it was the demons who saved him. But he also didn't like the demons. Kun Wuzi was right. The demons were free and unfettered. He wasn't a teenager, so he wouldn't believe that kind of nonsense. A person or an organization might be misunderstood in a short period of time and bear a stigma, but it was impossible to be misunderstood for thousands of years. The demons were notorious, and Li Yunxin roughly knew what kind of people they were. But now he had become a focus, a core, and he could no longer stay out of it. Why did the Lord Dongting keep him in this restrictive spell? Li Yunxin thought for a long time. This was probably the longest time he had spent in this world. He weighed many things within his abilities, simulating and planning a few possible routes. If what Kun Wuzi said is true, what will he do after he goes to Dao Tong? How should he deal with it? If he ignores them and hides in Dongting on the side of demons, what will happen in the future? How should he deal with it? The biggest uncertainty came from his lineage. If he was an ordinary person, Kun Wuzi probably wouldn't express goodwill like this. At least it seemed like he was expressing goodwill. But he was also afraid that because of this bloodline he would turn to the demons, and become a target that Dao Tong and Kenzo must eliminate. He pondered silently for an hour, and Kun Wuzi also patiently waited for an hour. Soon after, the sky turned white. For the first time in his life, Li Yunxin finally raised his head. He looked at Kun Wuzi. I can't open this Dongting. But even if I can, I won't open it. I have done a lot of things in the past few months, not only to survive but also to get rid of fear. Dao Tong and Kenzo have systems and systems. I may have privileges there, but I'm still a part of it. Since I'm a part of it, I have to be restricted and follow the rules set by others. And I've always been afraid of this kind of thing. I don't want to hand over my fate and decision-making power to others. Everyone has the freedom to be free from fear. If you don't understand it, it's called natural human rights. In the current world, it's unrealistic to talk about this freedom, but it's the goal I've been working hard for. I was scared by demons before, and I was also scared by people from Dao Tong and Kenzo. They all made me feel threatened and scared. Therefore, Kun Wuzi has already understood what Li Yunxin wanted to say. He feels strange about the word freedom, and he will completely understand the freedom and pursuit that Li Yunxin said after a long time. But now he still can't understand and agree with it. He said in a low voice, demons also have systems and hierarchy. They are even stricter than human beings. I can talk to the 7 suns behind me peacefully. Maybe there are some demons who can do this, but there won't be many. Dao Tong and Kenzo may not represent light, but demons must represent darkness. If you still think that you are a human in your heart, or if you still have some humanity. But it's still different. Li Yunxin smiled. I can be a lord among demons. But in Dao Tong, do you know why Yunzi was killed by me? A demon in the transcendent state like the 9th young master could set up a territory by the Wei River. But Yunzi, a Taoist in the true state, tried his best to get a little power to guard the city of Wei, and even sacrificed 36 cultivators to lure me into the trap. I don't want to be in the same situation as him. Dao Tong and Kenzo. Li Yunxin thought for a while and suddenly laughed. The company is big, the benefits are good, and the salary is high. But I'm not a quiet person. What I want is not a high salary but space and career prospects. Want to be a demon king. Since I'm here and have so many opportunities and adventures and I'm a genius, if I don't reach the highest point in this world I can't forgive myself. Can you understand me? Kun Wuzi may not understand the words that Li Yunxin said. But anyone who had learned to explain words would probably be able to roughly understand the meaning of each word from those words. He had a general idea. The master of Langia Cave thought for a while and said with a serious face, if I've never met you I would think that you're bewitched by those demons. But since I've dealt with you I know that these are your own ideas. If that's the case, Li Yunxin, listen carefully. Emperor Li cultivated the body of the Ghost King and the world was shocked. He killed 4 and injured 1, and it was a terrible thing that had never happened in 1,000 years. But just now you saw it clearly. Such a big demon was also killed by me, Dao Tong, within 2 months. It's not just me. The Ghost King came to the Wei River, and wherever he went the disciples of Dao Tong all risked their lives. This is the power of Dao Tong and Kenzo for thousands of years. There are many things that you think are important, but to us it's just a gust of wind. A gust of wind is always a gust of wind, and it can't hurt the mountain. As for the so-called, Kun Wuzi shook his head. War? Maybe it is for the demons. But for Dao Tong and Kenzo, it's just a way to free up their hands and clean up the things that should have been cleaned up a long time ago. Li Yunxin, you're standing on the side that's destined to fail. Li Yunxin smiled. It doesn't matter. I don't intend to stand here forever. Kun Wuzi sighed. I shouldn't have asked you. I said I want you to open the inhibition and hand over Dongting. You think I'm threatening you, but here in Dao Tong I'm being very lenient. Since it's like this, I'll tell you now. After tomorrow the cultivators in the Qing Kingdom will arrive at the Wei River and Dongting. Just for one thing, to confirm whether the soul of Shinryu is really in the Dongting Lake. If there is, we must get it. Then the cultivators in the world will clean up the demons. No matter how good their reputation is or how high their cultivation is. If you want to blame someone, blame Emperor Li. Although the matter of Emperor Li didn't shake the foundation, it has made Dao Tong and Kenzo know that at this time, the situation of the world has reached a critical point. The demons should no longer be indulged. There are only humans in this world, and that's enough. Dao Tong and Kenzo have the determination to sacrifice all the cultivators in the Xian realm. For us, it's just a small loss that can be made up for in a few hundred years. In the past we've experienced more. When Kun Wuzi said these words, it didn't seem like he was threatening Li Yunxin. Instead it seemed like he wanted to tell Li Yunxin something in advance so that he could be prepared. Li Yunxin couldn't guess why Kun Wuzi did this, and Kun Wuzi also didn't know why he did this. But he just felt that it was a pity. Everyone in the world knew about the 2 sages. But the 2 sages had lived in this world for 3,000 years. 3,000 years ago the 2 sages were just unknown cultivators. 2,400 years ago they reached the realm of Taishang Wangqing. And then, in the next 2,400 years, there were no more Taishang cultivators. There were even only 11 cultivators who reached the realm of Guangxing Mysterious. But even before that, although there weren't many cultivators who reached the realm of Taishang Wangqing, there would always be 4 or 5 of them every 1,000 years. Kun Wuzi wasn't happy to see such a situation. In his eyes, this Li Yunxin was actually a good seedling for cultivation. But it was a pity that such a person had entered the path of the demons. Just like that person 1,000 years ago. After both sides talked about these things, Kun Wuzi didn't delay any further. He waved his sleeves and a thin layer of mist suddenly appeared between him and Li Yunxin. The mist climbed up the layer of restriction around Dongting Lake, and like a layer of mist covering a piece of glass, The outside couldn't be seen clearly. This hazy milky white mist quickly spread out for a few miles, and finally covered the entire Dongting Lake. Li Yunxin realized that this time he was jointly isolated from the world by the demons and human cultivators. He let out a soft breath, turned around and went straight into Dongting Lake. It took him half an hour to find Red Lady. When he found her, this carp spirit was on the white beach of Mount Jun. Wuxia overturned the water in Dongting, and Mount Jun wasn't spared either. One of the 8 sceneries of Dongting in the past was now beyond recognition. There used to be lush vegetation on the mountain, but now the shorter trees have been broken, not to mention the shorter shrubs and grasses. These plants rolled down from the mountain, piling up on the shore and the beach. Of course, there were also dead fish, birds and beasts. Although only one night has passed, the weather in July and August in Dongting is like a steamer basket. Their corpses are soaked in water and gradually they start to emit an unfriendly smell. Red Lady is in the mess on the shore, looking up at the School of the Emperor Star. The School of the Emperor Star is unharmed. When Li Yunxin first saw the Lord Dongting in Mount Jun, he thought there was nothing special about this wooden palace. He thought it was a place where the big demon Lord Dongting played and ate people in his spare time. But now he knows it is not an ordinary thing. The cornice on the stone gate with the words, School of the Emperor Star, on the shore has not been damaged. It is still the same as when he first came here. He also comes to this mess and the feeling of stepping on the ground makes him feel a little comfortable. My father didn't allow me to come here before. Red Lady looks at the gate and says, but now he can't control me. She then turns around and looks at Li Yunxin. What happened over there? I'm afraid those Taoists don't dare to listen. Li Yunxin frowns slightly and waves his sleeves. A gust of evil wind rises on the ground, sweeping the messy plants and corpses nearby far away into the lake. There is fog on the shore of Dongting Lake, but the sky is blue. He can still see the sun rising from the east. The debris swept away by his evil wind stirred up a wave in the distance and then calmed down. He squints at the water for a while and then turns to look at Red Lady. The war has started. Red Lady is slightly stunned and asks him with her eyes wide open, what war? Li Yunxin stretches out his hand and draws a circle in the air, demons. Then he draws another circle, Dao Tong, the war has started. Dao Tong plans to kill all the demons in the world. Hearing this, Red Lady is not so interested. Oh. She turns her head and points to the white beach in front of her. I used to think that this place is less lively. I like the wooden pavilion in Egret Island, but it is destroyed. Now my father is not here and this place is sealed. We can also build a wooden pavilion here. We can use the Polonia on Mount Jun. We can drink and talk in the pavilion when we are free. Li, what do you think? Aren't you afraid of the war? This is a major event that concerns every demon. You are also a Yin spirit and a demon. Red Lady blinks and laughs. What's the use of being afraid? I am a woman and my magic power is not strong. I am powerful in front of little demons and monsters, but in front of a big demon like Li, I am just a pawn. Besides, I can't decide the general trend and disputes of the world. The happiest period of my life is right in front of me. Red Lady hesitates for a while and finally steps forward to the gate of the School of the Emperor Star. At first she takes a few steps carefully, but after finding nothing unusual she walks faster and faster. She stops in front of the threshold and glances at the front hall hidden in the flowers and trees in the distance. Finally she crosses the threshold. She stands quietly in the shadow of the trees behind the threshold for a while and then turns to Li Yunxin with a happy smile. Look, it's right in front of us. Li and I are trapped in this Dongting, and the human cultivators and demons outside can fight as much as they want. When the result of the battle is out, if the demons win we can still continue to live freely. If the human cultivator wins, Li can kill me as a sign of loyalty. I will also be happy. How good would that be? Li Yunxin spread her hands speechlessly and sighed. All right. It's none of your business but it's mine. Tell me how to get out of this inhibition first. Chapter 209. Hong Yangzi stood in the shadows and tilted her head slightly. She looked at Li Yunxin and smiled mischievously. Didn't I tell Li Lang earlier? My father refined the Jianmu into my body and now I can sense the inhibition of Dongting. This means that I am the circle eye of this inhibition. Although I am the circle eye, I really don't know how to get out of this inhibition. My father should have a way, but he didn't tell me. She thinks for a while, reaches out to pull a small red flower from a branch beside her, inserts it into her hair bun and turns to walk to the front hall. But my dear, you are so smart. You should know that there is another way to solve this inhibition. That is, destroy the circle eye. My father spent a lot of effort to refine the circle eye into my body. In the past, destroying the circle eye was more difficult than destroying the circle. But now if you want to go out. She tilts her head, just kill me. Red Lady, the only daughter of Lord Dongting, loves Li Yunxin strongly because of her obsession. After saying this, she turns around a cluster of flowers and disappears into the moon gate on the west side of the main hall. Li Yunxin stands on the white beach of Mount June for a while, and then realizes that he is going to face a choice again. But he is not sure that he can make a good choice. Lord Dongting did this deliberately, this old devil. Kun Wuxia tries to persuade himself to turn to Daotong with words and the general trend. Lord Dongting also does the same thing but more directly and crudely. Killing Red Lady can get out of Dongting. But for him, it also means destroying the humanity in his heart. Does Li Yunxin need humanity? Does he still have humanity in his heart? In fact, he often asks himself these two questions, but he doesn't expect that he will face them directly so soon. He looks up at the rising sun and feels a little annoyed for the first time. Not far away there comes the sound of waves. It is probably the evil flood dragon at the bottom of the lake. But after all, Dongting is vast, not a small pond. He looked at the flood dragon and with a gust of wind he rushed into the sky and fled into the distance. If he needs a long time to make a choice, he has to figure out what Dongting looks like first. In this day and age, any reliable map was considered a contraband. The maps that were circulated among the people, which seemed to be child's play, were also regarded as treasures. If he wanted to know the situation of the waters that he was temporarily in charge of, he couldn't just look at those things. He had to see it for himself. The area of Dongting is hundreds of times larger than the city of Wei. Red Lady shouldn't be the only Yin deity who could speak and was rational, right? Therefore he began to patrol the waters where he might have to stay for a long time. But he didn't expect that it would take 6 whole days. At first he wanted to see the hydrology and landforms along the coast. Hence he looked at it in detail. In the past, the furthest he had gone was Nanshan Hill and no further. This time he just flew all the way over, not letting go of the scenery by the lake. The area outside the restrictive spell had been sealed by the fog, but there was still 1 zhang of land on the shore. There were either flowers and trees growing on the ground or a shallow beach or a small pier. The first day he felt it was interesting, but he didn't find anyone. On the second day he felt it was boring. What was the most fun thing in the world? It was people. There were few people around the lake at the moment, and there were patches of shallow beach and trees by the lake. He had something on his mind and couldn't calm down, so he didn't have the mood to enjoy the nature and scenery. He was bored after looking at it for a whole day. So he sped up on the second day. The scenery whizzed past under his body and the strong wind blew on his face. He was thinking about his own troubles while looking at the scenery. But even so, it still took him 4 days to go around the Dongting. He flew in the sky and his speed was as fast as the wind and lightning. If it were measured by the feet of the mortals, it wouldn't be strange for him to travel for half a year. But it seemed that he didn't gain anything. In fact, Guinanshan had already left the territory of the Wei River Prefecture by dusk on the first day. He had passed through 6 prefectures and 2 prefectures in the last few days. The Dongting was vast and boundless, and all the prefectures should have docks by the lake. It was more convenient to transport goods by water. However, because of the magic of Kun Wuxia, Li Yunxin could only see a few wreckages of the docks by the lake. He couldn't see anyone, so they must be dead. The forbidding formation by the lake was still covered with fog. The people living by the lake must be panicking, not knowing what had happened. Many fishermen and boatmen who relied on the Dongting to make a living must have lost their livelihood. On the 4th day he finally saw the vague shadow of Mount June in the distance. He circled around and came back. At this moment he realized that he had only seen a small part of the Dongting by looking at the shore. If there were any unexpected people or things in the lake, they must be in the lake. Mount June was a large island. If people moved there, it could accommodate thousands of families. However, such a Mount June was not even a sesame seed on a big cake in Dongting. It could only be the tip of a needle. There were many islands like this in Dongting. Who knows, there might be a surprise hidden there. It could also be surprise or fear. He spent another 2 days circling around Mount June, circling and circling. As a result, it was like flying on the sea. All he could see was indigo water. He couldn't even see the fog on the forbidding formation. He used the sun as a reference, but it was not very accurate. In the end, he spent 2 days in vain. He only saw a reef island protruding from the water. There was no other harvest. He didn't want to continue. He finally understood how big Dongting was. 100 or 200 of these Dongting caves would fill up the entire Qin kingdom, right? He spent a whole 6 days doing this futile thing, but his furrowed brows never relaxed. He hadn't made a decision yet. However, an accident happened on the 7th day. He found another island. This island should have been uninhabited before. Because it was in the hinterland of Dongting, the surrounding water was deep. It was like a pillar protruding from the bottom of the lake and exposed on the water alone. It was not easy to build a dock around such a deep water island. There were no fish and it was far from the shore. It was doomed to be uninhabited in this era. The trees on the island were verdant. Under the sun of the 7th day, they were like a piece of finely carved green jade, which was delightful. Li Yunxin saw this scene, and his irritation in his heart disappeared for no reason. It surprised him. He had been indulging the uneasiness in his heart and was happy to experience the morbid pleasure brought by this uneasiness. But now he was refreshed. He thought maybe his subconscious thought he couldn't go on like this in the current situation. There were people waiting for him outside. The ghost emperor was in the city of Wei and his demon disciples were also outside. It was said that Lu Laodao ran away with them, but he didn't know whether he was safe or not. He agreed with his subconscious's decision and decided to escape for the last day. After 7 days, he wanted to return to the life of fighting in which every nerve was tense all the time. Life was a battle. Comfort meant death. He made such a decision and landed on the island with clouds and mist. Then he saw a broken ship on the shore. It was a ship. This meant that this ship was not small when it was alive. It was the kind of gaily painted pleasure boat that could only be owned by rich families. Now it was lying on the shore with only the keel left. The hull was smashed into pieces. He walked around the ship and saw a line of footprints. So he followed the footprints into the forest. When he walked into the forest, the footprints disappeared, but something else was left. Some shells were scattered in the grass as if someone ate them while walking and threw them away. There was no beach on this island. Li Yunxin thought for a while and guessed that they were probably shellfish that were originally attached to the wreckage of the ship. He followed the shells and saw a huge stone in the forest. It was about 3 or 4 stories high and was surrounded by large trees. It was a big green stone, but it was empty at the bottom. There was a fire and there was a person beside the fire. Li Yunxin looked around and didn't find anything unusual. So he walked over and stood at the entrance of the stone cave to take a look. That fire had been burning for a while and was about to be extinguished. An old man with white hair was lying on his side on the ground. His clothes were still intact. He didn't look like a fisherman but a rich person. He must be someone from that ship. At this time the old man woke up. He propped himself up and looked at the cave entrance. He squinted his eyes as if the sunlight outside the cave was blinding his eyes. Then he rubbed his eyes and sat up straight. He stared at Li Yunxin for a while and said in a hoarse voice, "Ah, you young man, are you also in trouble here?" Li Yunxin didn't say anything. He slowly walked in and walked around the cave. It was called a cave, but it was actually a very wide stone gap. The fire and sunlight illuminated a part of it, but there were more hidden in the shadows. It was a hot sunny day outside, but it was cool inside the cave. The old man didn't find it strange when he saw him like this. He only smiled and said, "I thought only this ship was in trouble. I didn't expect there to be people. I think I must have angered the Dragon King yesterday because of the downpour." Li Yunxin walked in front of him and squinted at him. "Where are you from?" The old man grunted in acknowledgement. "Normal people shouldn't look like you in this situation," Li Yunxin said slowly. "This place is very far from the shore. You should know that fishermen are unlikely to come. You're an old man. You will die after staying here for a few days. But you look so calm and relaxed." The old man heard this and laughed. When he laughed, the wrinkles on his face piled up, but he looked very kind and amiable. His eyes squinted into a line. He only used the corner of his eyes to look at people. "You young man, Sai, what's there to be afraid of dying? This old man has lived to 68 years old. People say I'm an old man. But this old man, was tricked into this ship by my children. They said they sent me to this lake to play, but in fact they dug a hole in the bottom of the ship. My old servant escorted me to this shore. My children went back in the small boat. Who would have thought that it would suddenly rain? I survived in this cave, but my children died in the lake. In this case, what's there to be afraid of? Li Yunxin thought carefully. He picked up a blue stone next to the fire and sat down. He picked up a piece of dry wood from the ground and threw it into the fire. He laughed and said, "So you're not an ordinary person. Only rich or noble people would do such things. Were you a noble in the government or a hero in Jianghu?" The old man laughed. "Let's not talk about it. But I can see that you're not an ordinary person. Where are you from?" "I'm from the Tang of the East." Li Yunxin replied casually, "If we're going to stay on this island for a while, what are you going to eat?" "I saw shells when I came here. Now it seems that I've eaten all of them. What will I do in the future? Will you hunt for a living? You don't look very healthy." The old man laughed. "I don't like the fishy smell of water. I don't eat fish, shrimps and shells. I've lived for decades. I can't lose my chastity when I'm old." The shells that the young master saw on the road were not leftovers, but were for his use. But they weren't easy to use, so I threw them away. Speaking of food, I have an old servant. As I said before, he protected me on the shore. With him, I don't have to worry about food these days. Li Yunxin looked at the old man. "He went hunting?" "I said he's an old servant." The old man stood up. His stomach growled. From his point of view, this was a rude thing to do, but he didn't care about it now. He slowly walked to a shadowy spot in the rock gap. It was cold and wet, dripping water. Maybe it would form a stalactite after thousands of years. "I'm an old servant, but I don't have a good weapon. Where can I go hunting?" The old man stopped and sighed. "I've been with him for more than 40 years. He always said that his life is mine. In the end, this life really became mine." He stretched out his hand and felt around in the shadow. Li Yunxin heard a crisp sound. He thought it was the sound of shells hitting rocks. Then he heard the sound of a sack being cut. Then the old man turned around. Li Yunxin saw that he was holding a bloody piece of meat in his hand. There was still some dark white skin attached to it. The old man looked at him for a while and became silent. He walked to the fire and put the meat on the stone. He used the sharp edge of the big shell in his other hand and slowly cut it. As he cut, he said, "Beasts, if you don't eat me, then I eat you." The human world was exactly the same. But people eat better. They don't eat your flesh but eat your essence. But it's good to look good. People eat their essence, but they are still there. As long as they don't die, they can still recover. But some people, after living in this world for a long time, forget what people were like when they were still beasts. They need to eat their essence, and they also need to eat human flesh. They say that this world also eats people. There's no justice in this world. But how can there be justice in this world? Being like this in the human world is already much better than beasts being like this. We have to make it better, not worse. The old man cut a piece of meat. He shakily pierced it with a twig and roasted it over the fire. After roasting for a while, he looked up at Li Yunxin. "If there's a person who doesn't want to be a human but a beast, what does that person think?" Chapter 210. The sun outside the stone crack is still bright, but the temperature inside the stone crack seems to be getting lower and lower. Li Yunxin silently watches him roasting the meat on the fire. He feels the scene in front of him is a bit familiar. But after all, he is no longer the boy who shivers in the cold rainy night and can only be trampled on. He keeps silent for a while and looks up at the old man's white hair and bark-like face. "What's your name?" The old man takes a deep breath, inhaling the fragrance of the meat. Then he says slowly, "I have forgotten the past and my name. Now I am a new student. Since I met you in this lake, I call myself the Old Man of the Lake." Li Yunxin thinks for a while and says calmly, "The Old Man of the Lake is indeed an artistic and stylish name. But if I have to call you the Old Man of the Lake, every time I call you, it will be a bit delusional. What's your name?" The old man looks at him, blinks and smiles inexplicably. "Oh, my surname is Su." "Then I will call you Lord Su." Li Yunxin looks at the meat. "Lord Su, do you know that I am a monster? This Dongting is now my Taoist field." The old man looks at him for a while and opens his mouth. "Oh, I think you are also a monster." You come here alone on such a day. There is no sweat on your body and your clothes are clean without a trace of dust. You also have a fairy face. You must not be a human. But you are a monster and you are in charge of this Dongting. You must be powerful. I have been trapped here for many days and can't solve my worries. Monster Taoist, can you give me a jar of good wine to drink? Li Yunxin listens to his words and smiles slightly. He flicks his wrist and a folding fan appears in his hand. He wipes the fan and takes out a pot of wine. He puts the wine beside the fire in front of the old man and says, "This is Mu Nan Chun from Mu Nan House in the city of Wei." He pauses and says, "I don't know if he is still here." The old man takes the wine and lifts the pot to pour the wine into his mouth. Then he takes a long breath and says, "Good wine. Good wine. Young master, give me wine and I'll give you meat. Take it." He tossed the branch in his hand over the bonfire. Li Yunxin stretched out his hand to catch it, looked at it carefully and then put it on the fire to roast. The old man claps his hands and says, "You are the monster in charge of Dongting, but you don't look happy now. It was said that demons were carefree and did whatever they wanted. What was on the young master's mind? I don't think I have long to live. Why don't you tell me?" Li Yunxin looked at him. "With Master Su's ability, do I still need to tell you about my troubles?" The old man shook his head. "This Su Gong in front of you is just an old man. How could he have the ability to read your mind? If you don't feel at ease, you can kill me with a single palm strike. Then you can see what kind of person I am." Li Yunxin seriously considered his suggestion for a while. Then he flipped the roasted meat in his hand. "There are some troubles in front of me." He was silent for a moment and then he actually said, "I have a few friends outside Dongting Lake and I don't know where they are. But now I can't get out. I'm worried. I'm afraid that they have been killed by people or demons. I'm even more afraid that they will be caught and used to threaten me, then I have to make a choice I don't like. What's really troublesome?" The old man sighed. His voice was a little louder because of the wine. "Young master, you're afraid that you can't convince yourself. I just hate tests." Li Yunxin smiled. "Some things are fine as long as they are as usual. But when it comes to the test, no one knows what choice they will make. So don't test human nature. I don't like it at all." He glanced at the old man. "I don't like stupid tests either." The old man smiled kindly and took the meat on the branch back. He reached out to tear off a slightly burnt shredded meat and tasted it. He said, "It's a little tasteless without salt. But it seems that young master's troubles are not limited to this. Is there anything else?" Li Yunxin watched him put the shredded meat into his mouth and chewed it carefully. He said, "Something else. Someone forced me to choose a side. It's also annoying, but I can't stay out of it. But the reason is the same as before. If I can get some of my old friends in, maybe I'll feel better. But I don't think you can do anything about it. I don't know whether you're an enemy or a friend, but I think you're a good person. It's fate that we met. I still have something to do. See you later." He stood up and put the branch on the stone slab. He was about to leave. The old man put down the meat in his hand, looked up at him and said with a smile, "I've received your wine. How can I let you go back empty-handed? Young master, look, where is this?" After saying that, he tapped the ground with the branch in his hand and pointed outside the crevice. Li Yunxin looked outside. Outside the stone crack was the sun and the wild woods. At this time it still looked like the sun and the wild woods. But it was no longer the same as when he came in. Outside the cave, the banyan trees were lush and green. A corner of the cornice peeked out from the bushes. It was no longer the island he came in from. He was shocked and turned to look at the old man. But the old man didn't look strange. He just slowly tore the meat and occasionally drank a mouthful of wine, just like any other old man who was gluttonous. He smiled kindly at Li Yunxin and waved his hand. "Go, go." Li Yunxin was familiar with the old man's current expression. It was common, but it seemed strange at this time. It was the kind of expression a kind grandfather would have when he blew a candy for a child on the side of the road and watched the child run away happily. He wanted to say something several times, but he stopped himself. But soon he realized a fact. No matter who the other party was, their means were far above his. After escaping danger, he should make a divination for himself. He wanted to see if this was an unlucky year. Why did accidents happen one after another? But now he smiled and cupped his hands. "Thank you very much." After that, he strode out and went straight into the forest. The old man squinted at him and shook his head. You're a good boy. Li Yunxin was sure that he was not on the island. After a few steps he rode on a cloud and rose into the sky. He tried his best to look into the distance. But he realized that this place didn't seem to be the real world. Or rather, it was only a part of the real world. The banyan forest with a temple as the center was real, but there was white fog beyond 100 feet. He was sure that even if he rushed into the fog he wouldn't be able to get out. So he went straight for a while and landed in the temple. It was a dilapidated temple that seemed to have been located in the wilderness. The 2 pairs of stone lions at the door were covered with moss, and the horizontal board of the main hall was also shaking. The ground was also covered with weeds and it looked very deserted. But as soon as Li Yunxin entered, the temple immediately became lively. 2 talismans went straight for him and there were 2 whistling sounds in the air. The broken stone floor in the courtyard trembled slightly, and a golden light rippled like water. He felt the familiar power of a formation. He also heard a high-pitched bewitching voice, Aya. Run. Li Yunxin took the 2 talismans and pinched them in his palm, turning them into flames and ashes. He took another 2 steps forward and the 2 flying swords hit his chest, but they didn't even leave a white mark. He took another 4 steps forward and kicked away a row of stones in the weeds. He shouted, "What are you panicking for? It's me." After he shouted, the courtyard suddenly became quiet. Li Yunxin let out a sigh of relief. Any casualties? Sanhua slowly poked her head out of the main hall. She stared at Li Yunxin for a while and then said doubtfully, "Huh? This is real, huh? Fake, huh?" Then he saw the door of the main hall was pushed open. Lu Laodao frowned and his hair was messy. He carefully looked him up and down and after a while he asked tentatively, "Brother Exen?" Li Yunxin spread out his hands. "Someone else pretended to be me?" But Lu Laodao didn't say anything and continued to stare at him. Li Yunxin sighed and said, 800 soldiers ran to the north slope, and the artillery ran to the north side. The soldiers were afraid to touch the artillery and the artillery was afraid to touch the soldiers. What's your name? My name is Li Yunxin. Get it? Lu Laodao probably didn't understand this and neither did Sanhua Dragon Lady. But Lu Laodao knew that this was indeed Brother Exen. He immediately rushed out of the room, grabbed Li Yunxin's hand, looked him up and down and said in a hoarse voice, "You scared Laodao to death." Li Yunxin was slightly touched by his attitude, but he didn't relax his vigilance. Things were strange. The Lu Laodao and Sanhua Dragon Lady in this temple knew that he was Li Yunxin, but he had no other way to know that they were the real Lu Gongzan and Sanhua. Because they were people of this era, they couldn't come up with any recognizable tongue twisters or elementary school English texts. Li Yunxin looked into the temple again. Where's Shirkuizi? At this time Laodao blinked and his expression became sad. He's hurt. The 3 of us are the only ones who have walked together. The others. Li Yunxin walked into the main hall of the ruined temple. He saw Shirkuizi lying on her side on the ground with Lu Laodao's Taoist robe under her body. There were no visible wounds on her body, but her face was pale and her breath was weak. He bent down to check her breath and then checked her pulse. Checking the pulse was one of the things that cultivators had to learn. In the early stage of foundation building, they had to understand the meridians and acupoints of the body to have good luck. But he didn't learn it well, so he didn't know what was wrong with Shirkuizi. He heard Lu Laodao talking anxiously behind him. That day Brother Exen sent her to the abandoned palace and asked the Ghost Emperor to take care of her. He also drew a substitute and put it on Nanshan Hill. I thought I would go get her after this was over. Who knew that something had happened to Brother Exen and he was nowhere to be found. So I took Jessen to look for the 4 generals outside the city. In the end I only found her. Sanhua stood at the door and looked at Li Yunxin with blinking eyes. When she saw Lu Laodao looking at her she said, Oh, I don't know. A group of Taoists came. Oh, that fierce one. Li Yunxin didn't want to listen to her so he looked at Lu Laodao. Laodao looked at Shirkuizi worriedly and said, Brother Exen sent them out of the city, and told them to guide the resentment of the dead souls outside the city of Wei. This was done safely, but we didn't know what the situation was like inside the city so we waited outside the city. Who knew that a yellow-robed demon would come first, followed by a group of Taoist priests. They wanted to kill the Yin god as soon as they saw it. At this time we couldn't wait so we ran away. Sanhua and I escaped together and Jessen, that child, was separated. Later I thought that the child was still muddle-headed and maybe she went to the old house of the Qiao family. So I took the risk to go back but I didn't find her. Then I went to the abandoned palace. But the palace was also surrounded by a group of Taoists. I saw magic and talismans flying all over the sky and there was a real fight. The people on the streets were running for their lives. I only took a glance and saw the palace wall collapse. That ghost emperor. Alas. Lu Laodao sighed. That Emperor Zhao of the Yi dynasty brought her out and handed her to me, but she was surrounded by a group of Taoists. That ghost emperor, alas, alas. Lao Dao sighed 3 times and wiped his eyes. That ghost emperor is a ghost but he's really loyal and courageous. He told I that Shirkuizi was entrusted to him by you, Brother Exen. He, the emperor of the Yi dynasty, couldn't let you down. He used his supernatural power to send us out of the city and stop those Taoists. I waited outside the city for a while and saw the city was full of light and gloomy but after a while, there was no sound. I don't know what happened. Li Yunxin was silent for a while and sighed with Lu Laodao. Then Lao Dao said, He was hit by a Taoist spell when she came out of the abandoned palace with Emperor Yi. Alas, Lao Dao, alas, alas. Li Yunxin thought for a while and stood up. I have demonic power in my body. He frowned and said, I can't just put some spiritual power and true qi into people's bodies to save them. This is a troublesome thing. But, what happened just now? Someone pretended to be me? Lu Laodao and Sanhua looked at each other. But, there was more than one. When we entered the temple there was fog around us. We couldn't get out. No matter how far we walked, once we got out of the fog we would still be in the temple. Then at night people came one after another. They all said it was you, Brother Exen. But when I asked Lao Dao I knew it wasn't you. Who else in this world can say the same thing as you, Brother Exen? They pretended to be me. Then they asked you something about me. Li Yunxin looked outside the temple. Did you see an old man? Lu Laodao thought for a while and opened his mouth to speak, but he couldn't hear any sound. Then his figure started to fade. The main hall was also fading. The whole world and the background were fading. Li Yunxin reached out to grab it, but he only had time to stretch his hand into the white fog that had occupied every inch of the surrounding space. But he still grabbed something. The fog suddenly dissipated. He found he was still sitting next to the fire. He was holding his folding fan in his hand. The piece of meat in the old man's hand was almost eaten by him. The empty wine pot was lying on the side. He looked at Li Yunxin with a smile and didn't speak. Li Yunxin took a deep breath. Sir, are you from Dao Tong? Chapter 211. I'm a person of this world. The old man said with a smile. At the same time he picked up the piece of meat that Li Yunxin put on the stone slab and handed it to him. It's cold and doesn't taste good. If you haven't eaten this, you really don't know what is the best taste in the world. The meat was indeed cold. A layer of white fat solidified on the surface of the dark brown meat, covering the original burnt smell. Li Yunxin looked at the meat and reached out his hand to take it. After hesitating for a while he sat by the bonfire and put the meat on the fire. Was what I saw just now an illusion? Some of it was, some of it wasn't. Li Yunxin found that the old man didn't look very old and his movements weren't that slow. He should be a hale and hearty old man. The old man looked at Li Yunxin, but the information is always correct. The 3 of them are more than 100 miles away from the city of Wei in that temple. That woman, she won't die for a while. Li Yunxin thought for a while. So it's true. But the scenes and details I saw were all illusions. You just replayed them for me. The old man smiled. You are a smart young master. But how do you know what they will say and do? The illusion you created is so vivid that I can't find any flaws. I don't know. I don't have any supernatural power to create an illusion. The old man said with a smile. He seemed to like to see Li Yunxin's confused look, which made him happy and interesting and also a novel experience. There is a good painting on the fan in your hand. You've recorded everything you've seen and everything you've thought. What you've seen just now is only what's in your mind, not what I've done. When he grabbed at the mist just now he had grabbed his own folding fan. So you protected the 3 of them. Li Yunxin looked at him. What do you need me to do? The old man found some dry firewood on the ground and added it to the fire to make it bigger. The flames licked the meat in Li Yunxin's hand and the fragrance rose again. He pointed at the piece of meat. Eat it first. Li Yunqin didn't say anything. He tore off a piece and put it into his mouth. An excited expression immediately appeared on the old man's face. "Oh, you're not afraid of human flesh?" Li Yunqin smiled. "It doesn't look like it. Since I'm a fiendish demon, I must have done some research on human flesh." But after he said this, his expression froze slightly. Because the taste exploded in his mouth. He had not eaten much of the delicacies of this era, but he had eaten a lot in his previous world. In such a highly developed world, he had tried all kinds of ingredients and cooking methods. He had thought that all the delicacies in the world were just esu. But who would have thought that the thing in his mouth, such a simple thing that had been roasted over the fire, would actually taste like this? When he spoke, his teeth bit the meat into pieces. The aroma from the muscle fibers burst forth. It was as if every piece of meat was full of fragrance and freshness, and now it finally found a chance to release it to its fullest. Such an aroma filled his mouth in an instant, but he didn't feel tired. After the fragrance, there was a smooth texture and greasy freshness, drilling into every corner of his mouth, lingering on every taste bud. "Is this thing?" Li Yunqin's eyes widened as he looked at the old man. The old man had already given him too many surprises. Seeing his reaction, the old man just smiled indifferently and said, "We are all passers-by. Many things that were not strange in the past, but later on, we know that they are the most precious things in this world. Since you have tasted this delicacy, it means that you are not a boring person. Then this old man has one more thing for you to do." Li Yunqin didn't say anything else. The miraculousness of this old man had exceeded his expectations. The old man continued to say, "This old man still has a month to live, 30 days. You play with me for 30 days. If I enjoy myself to the fullest, I will do one thing for you as a return of your favor. If I don't enjoy myself to the fullest, I won't give you anything." Master Su's body seems to be still strong. Li Yunqin said cautiously, "No matter how I look at it, your lifespan is more than 30 days. Who knows?" The old man stood up. Li Yunqin noticed that the old man seemed to be slightly taller than when he first saw him. He didn't know if it was because he had straightened his back. The old man held a piece of firewood that was still burning from the fire and asked Li Yunqin, "Do you know what kind of meat you just ate?" Without waiting for him to answer, he threw the firewood in his hand into the dark corner between the rocks. The corner was illuminated. With the help of the firelight, Li Yunqin clearly saw something. At first glance, it looked like a person who had his stomach cut open. White and fat, his stomach was cut open. One of his legs was missing and the other was half broken. The meat he ate just now should have been cut from that thigh. He was lying flat on a big rock in the corner, one hand hanging loosely down and his head slightly tilted back. This reminded Li Yunqin of a famous painting from his world, David's Death of Mala. But because of this, he could see his face clearly. It didn't seem to be human. The face had facial features, but like the Dharmakaya of Li Yunqin and Lord Dongting, it retained the outline of a human and some animal features. The facial features on the face were scattered, as if the original face had been inflated from the middle. "Child, you don't eat people," the old man said to him. "But what is a person? Are there internal organs, acupoints, and meridians? He also has them. He was originally a servant by my side, and his original body was a big boa in the Lawn River." Note. I said he protected me to the shore. As he did protect me to the shore. But like my son and daughter, he didn't have any good intentions. He coveted my things. But I'm just an old man who's about to die. What good things do I have? Alas, in the end he became my food. He is now a Dharmakaya of a demon. If you cut open his body, he's no different from a human. Is he a human? Seeing that Li Yunqin didn't speak, the old man continued, "Let's talk about other things, not just the internal organs but the brain. It's said that humans are the most intelligent of all creatures and they have wisdom. But did the demon have any intelligence? Eating such a thing that's no different from a human. Is it eating a human or is it eating wild game? Now think about what you just ate. Do you still think it's delicious?" Li Yunqin was silent for a while and then frowned slightly. "I thought you were from Daotong, but later I thought you were from the demon. You saved my people, so Daotong didn't use them to threaten me. So you seem to be on the side of the demon. Now you want me to eat this meat, eat it and show me its human body. The purpose is to make me feel uncomfortable. Look at it to break the line in my heart. I can eat this thing that has the same body structure and wisdom as a human. Why can't I eat a human?" Alas, but there are some things you don't know. Li Yunxin sighed. I've received higher education, so I know that even if the body structure looks the same, has the same thoughts and wisdom, but the DNA is different. You don't understand this word, but it's natural. But there's another thing. People say that he only looks like a human, but he's a demon. So what if he's really a human? You don't know my past. Or, this world, under the control of Daotong and Kenzo, is indeed more stable and happier than the medieval period of a world that might have existed. Daotong and Kenzo played a very positive role. Without their permission, there wouldn't be a large-scale war, and there wouldn't be, alas. In some places, at some times for a long period of time, it's not rare to use humans as military food, at least in such a cycle of hundreds of years. So, I'm very tolerant of cannibalism. Li Yunxin looked at the old man. Whether or not to eat humans is not the essential problem is something else here. He pointed a finger at his head. An unexpected and novel smile appeared on the old man's face again. He laughed loudly. Good. You're such an interesting young master. This old man wants to make up his mind. Let's go now? This cave is so boring. Without waiting for Li Yunxin's reply, the old man pulled him out of the cave. His hand was pulled and he wanted to shake it off. But he found, it was not the powerful strength of the demon that he imagined, nor was it the tough body of a successful human. It was the hand of an ordinary old man. His palm was slightly rough, but it was definitely not the hand of someone who was used to doing farm work. It was dry but very hot. It seemed to mean that the old man was in a good mood and his body was also very good. Because of this slight surprise, he let the old man pull him out of the cave into the forest. The old man didn't use any magical power and walked like an ordinary person. And Li Yunxin was waiting for the old man to cross the water, to see if the old man's habit of casting spells was more like that of a demon or a cultivator. This old man was neither good nor evil, and his words could be interpreted at will. He was really an unpredictable old fox. But when they reached the water, the old man stood still and didn't move. He only looked at Li Yunxin and said, "Take me away." Li Yunxin smiled. "Master Su has magical power, why do you need me to take you away?" The old man frowned at this time. "Child, when did I ever cast any magical power? Do you think I would lie to you?" Li Yunxin thought carefully. Then he realized that he really didn't. From the moment he saw the old man until now, the old man didn't show any ability that an ordinary old man in his 60s didn't have. He entered the illusion and saw Lu Laodao and Triflower Dragon Lady, but he didn't see how the old man cast spells. Li Yunxin shook his head. "Hey. Since Duke Su likes to hide his strength, then I will lend Duke Su a helping hand." Then he waved his sleeve and a gust of demonic wind swept the old man and himself up into the sky. Although flying was more convenient than when he was in the past, it was not as comfortable as when he was in the past. Flying in the sky, the wind was strong. The speed was also very fast. The strong wind poured into his mouth, making it difficult for him to breathe. The wind blew through his clothes, making him feel cold. Therefore, cultivators could only barely fly when they reached the transcendent state, and only when they reached the true state could they travel the world. Li Yunxin carried the old man up into the sky. He looked forward and deliberately flew very fast. After a quarter of an hour, he didn't see the old man say anything, so he turned his head slightly to look. He was shocked again. The old man's wrinkles were pulled together by the strong wind, and his eyes were closed tightly. His face was green and his mouth was half open. He looked like a person who was about to die. For a moment, Li Yunxin thought that the old man was deliberately deceiving him. But then he realized that if the old man was really a big shot like he expected, it was understandable that he was deliberately mystifying and pretending to be profound, but it was too undignified for him to act like this. He hurriedly slowed down and carried the old man behind him. He frowned and said, "You really?" The old man finally calmed down and pretended to be angry. "You little kid, why don't you believe me? You go alone." Then he suddenly swung his hand. Normally, an ordinary old man wouldn't be able to shake off Li Yunxin's hand. But seeing that the old man was about to get angry, Li Yunxin was prepared in his heart. Since he was prepared, he naturally planned to hit the enemy away at any time, so he only used a little strength in his hand. The old man suddenly broke free and with a kick his whole body fell straight towards the lake. Li Yunxin originally wanted to fish him up. But he saw that the old man's face was still angry, and he was staring at him without a hint of panic. Thus he retracted his stance and just watched. He saw the old man's body fall all the way to the lake. When he was still a few feet away from the water surface, he shouted with a hoarse voice, "Evil creature! Come out and welcome me." As soon as his voice fell, the originally calm lake was suddenly stirred up by a foul wind and turbid waves. Then there was a deep roar like that of a cow under the water surface, and a huge shadow appeared. There was another loud noise, and a hornless evil dragon suddenly rushed out of the water, jumped up and caught the old man on its head. Li Yunxin sucked in a breath of cold air in midair. Of course he recognized this evil dragon. It was the one that bumped into him in the White Forest 7 days ago. At that time the evil dragon was not afraid of Li Yunxin's chi-kissed dragon son, but now it was like a loyal dog coming to the old man's call. It was said that animals without intelligence knew the most about dignity and fear. Li Yunxin now looked at the evil dragon's head again. It had a pair of ox ears, but at this moment the pair of huge ox ears were pressed very low, close to the sides of the head, looking very scary. The old man was caught by the evil dragon, and the old man stretched out his hand to grab the thick hair on his temples. The hair on his temples was as thick as a child's arm. The old man stood in the hair and grabbed it firmly and then sat cross-legged in the hair. Immediately he had the momentum of an immortal riding a dragon to the 9th heaven. The dragon could not fly, it could only swim in the water. But at this time, there was an old man on its head, so it did not dare to bury its head in the water. It struggled to raise its head and slithered on the water surface. When it saw Li Yunxin in midair, it did not dare to show its fierce look, but from time to time it whimpered. It was as if it was begging him to quickly take the old man to the heavens. Li Yunxin followed the evil dragon, and his eyes were fixed on the old man's figure. Who was this god? At this time the old man raised his head, and the anger on his face disappeared, replaced by a happy smile. Child, have you ever experienced the feeling of riding a dragon? Chapter 212. The expression on the old man's face was cheerful and open-minded. Even with Li Yunxin's power he couldn't see any trace of pretense. It was as if an old man casually jumped on the back of a donkey on the side of the road, and then asked him with a smile, "Have you ever tried riding a donkey?" But if he was really an old man with no other thoughts, why would he be standing on the back of the evil dragon? He took a deep breath in the strong wind, slowly lowered his altitude, slowed down his speed, and walked side by side with the old man on the dragon's head. After a moment of silence he said, "Master Su is really a genius of the present age. I admire you. But although this evil dragon looks like a dragon, it's not a dragon. If there is a real dragon, it is the only one in the world. Who has ever tried to ride a dragon?" The old man listened to his words and laughed. "Hey, you don't know this, hee. He only said a few words and didn't continue. It was as if he knew a lot of secrets, but at this time he couldn't tell Li Yunxin in detail. Li Yunxin didn't ask further, and slowly learned how to get along with this old man. He smiled and said, "It's not convenient for Master Su to tell me now, but there will be a time in the future. I was impatient and anxious earlier, so I was rude and offended you. Master Su, please don't blame me." The old man snorted with a smile. "I've already heard of the famous human demon Li Yunxin. You don't need to pretend to be obedient. If you were really obedient, I wouldn't have come to play with you. If you want to apologize, you might as well think of a way to make me happy. If I'm satisfied, I'll promise you one thing when the deadline is up." Previously, this old man always said that he was an ordinary old man, which made Li Yunxin's heart uneasy. But now that he finally said, "I've already heard of the famous human demon Li Yunxin," his heart instantly calmed down. He didn't think that he was famous now. In the world there weren't many ordinary demons and cultivators who knew him. Just like how he didn't know the name of a random little fish. Logically speaking, there should be many demons living near the Wei River all year round, but he didn't know any of them, because he wasn't interested and there was no need. But among the others, some great fiendish demons, Taoist orthodoxies and sword sects, he should be quite famous. He was already in the true realm. Although there were always some old things with frighteningly high realms, among the demons and cultivators of the world, they were indeed worthy of the title, Great Fiendish Demon. Moreover, there were many mysteries about him that even he himself did not know. For example, the old man beside him probably knew some inside information. Now that the old man had said such words, It meant that he was also one of the small group of existences who stood at the peak of martial power in this world. Xianxia felt that at least he knew the details. Narrowing down the scope, he felt more at ease. He just didn't know whether the great name the old man mentioned was a bad name or something else. He hid the surprise on his face and said, "Mr. Su, you let me know the news of my disciples, which was a great kindness to me. Now Dongting is my Taoist field and I, as the host, naturally can't neglect the guests, let alone make any promises or conditions. I just don't know what kind of interesting thing Mr. Su is talking about." The old man smiled faintly in the wind and pointed forward. "You child, do you think this is interesting?" Xianxia looked forward following the direction of his finger. However, he didn't see anything interesting. They were deep in the hinterland of Dongting at the moment, surrounded by white lake water. The inhibition around Dongting Lake was still very far away, and they couldn't even see a shadow at this moment. Therefore only water, sky and clouds could be seen. Xianxia had been watching it for 6 or 7 days and he was tired of it. The old man seemed to have guessed what he was thinking and said, "Look carefully. Look at the water. The water under us is indigo. Farther away it becomes emerald green. When the water meets the sky it is bright white. The white gives birth to clouds. White clouds against the blue sunny sky, such a clean and refreshing scene, isn't it a wonder? Listen to the wind again. Sometimes high and sometimes low, sometimes far and sometimes near. Cover your ears." As he spoke, he really did cover his ears like a little child. He looked at Xianxia happily and his voice grew louder. "The sound of the wind is gone. But you can hear the humming sound. Let go of your hands again," the old man said and opened his arms again. He raised his head as if he was intoxicated. "The wind poured into your ears at this moment. Isn't it like the creatures in this world, the sky and the water, talking to you?" Xianxia blinked and didn't know what to say to fit the situation. The old man didn't think much of it when he saw how nonchalant he was. He sighed in the wind and said, "You are used to these scenes so you don't know how thrilling it is. If a blind or deaf person suddenly can see and hear, I don't know how excited he would be. The flowers and grasses, the mountains and the rivers around us, which we have grown weary of, are in fact magnificent scenes of unsurpassed beauty. But," he sighed again, "I've been blinded by those mundane things. I can't see the real splendor." Xianxia's heart skipped a beat. Because of the old man's words and behavior, he also had a slightly inaccurate but unusually bold guess in his heart. He had actually experienced the feeling the old man was talking about. Moreover, he should have experienced it more deeply and intensely than anyone else in this world. He was born with memories. Memories of his previous world, memories of a longer time. He stayed in his previous world for decades and in this world for more than 10 years. What experience and personality would prevail? At least for him, it was the past. People in this world couldn't imagine what his previous world was like. But people in his previous world had imagined what this world was like countless times. Just before he died there, some kind of immersive virtual technology had matured, and he had even experienced it several times. A huge amount of experience and knowledge filled his mind. These things could not be replaced or forgotten in a short 10 years of experience in this world. He was born and opened his eyes. For a long time, even a chopstick in his hand was worth a whole day of study. He looked at the handmade marks on the tables and chairs, and the small patterns on the porcelain cups and lanterns. He looked at the riveting process of the wooden houses and the quality of the window paper. At that time, the whole world was a huge mystery and novelty to him. He experienced it as a tourist and a native until one day he suddenly realized, "Oh, this place is real. I probably can't go back." The strong sense of novelty that was about to explode suddenly disappeared, and then he threw himself into those mundane things the old man talked about, magic and longevity. His situation was not exactly the same as the old man's, but some feelings were common. This made him even more curious about the identity of this Mr. Su. Who was he? He listened to the old man while thinking about it. His previous question of what kind of things seemed to open the old man's mouth, and then he couldn't stop. He first asked Xianxia to look at the water and clouds, and then asked him to listen to the wind. Then he began to ask him to smell the smell in the wind. The old man claimed that he could smell hundreds of smells in the wind, and he could know what the owner of the smell was doing based on those smells. To prove his point, he also asked Li Yunxin to dive 100 meters deep into the water and catch a fish from a stone cave. Then he used the thick and sharp mane of the evil dragon to cut open its stomach for him to see, to prove that what he said was right. This big fish had just eaten a small fish and there was a taste of fear in its stomach. Hidden under his old appearance was a heart full of emotion and vitality. He was so sensitive and perceptive that Li Yunxin would have categorized him as a mental patient without any hesitation if it weren't for the fact that his speech was still orderly and rational. But this old man also reminded him of a Taoist scripture. The virtuous one is like a pure child. Such a journey was not easy for Li Yunxin, but it was not difficult either. He was used to guessing a person's heart through their expression, tone, and words. That was because there was always logic in a person's words. And this logic, if one were to go deeper in Li Yunxin's case, it meant concealment. Because, therefore, this kind of thinking pattern seemed simple and direct, but the content of the because had already paved the way for the therefore to lead to the later therefore. People, whether trained or not, all had this innate concealment instinct. Because of this instinct, everything could be traced. What would happen if a person spoke without any rules or rules? What would happen if he spoke according to his heart? Li Yunxin used to think that there were two kinds of people like this. One was a crazy person who had lost his mind, and the other was the first one he had seen. He couldn't find the loopholes in the old man's thinking and logic. In layman's terms, he was so sensitive, and free to express that he was full of loopholes. He didn't know where to start at all. When he first met this old man, he just looked a little weird. But now his true temperament was revealed more and more, and he was gradually becoming a fanatic. Finally, they arrived at Mount June. Compared with the time when Li Yunxin left here 7 days ago, the only change in Mount June was that a wooden pavilion appeared on the beach. It looked nothing like the original wooden pavilion at Sanhiku. But maybe Red Lady just needed memories and artistic conception. Li Yunxin spent a quarter of an hour hesitating on the way, and then he told the old man how to unlock the inhibition of Dongting. The old man smiled faintly and didn't express his opinion. There were no twists and turns in the following things. Li Yunxin came to Ziwei Palace in Mount June once. He went to the front hall and the middle hall. Now he took the old man into Ziwei Palace from the front door and listened to his nagging all the way. Finally, he settled him in a bedroom in the middle hall. At that time it was already late and tired birds were returning to their nests. The old man, who was still excited in the daytime, began to yawn. Li Yunxin said a few indifferent words to him and then he left him in the room. He left and rose high in the sky. Standing in the bright moon, he stared at Ziwei Palace. Nothing happened all night, so he entered his dragon palace to take a rest for a while. He thought that the second day of the old man's arrival in Mount June would be a novel and boring day. He didn't expect that it would be another day that made him feel surprised and suspicious. In the morning, he saw Red Lady drinking alone in the pavilion on the beach with a pot of wine in her hand. There was a lake breeze in the morning and her figure was quite slender. The wind blew her red clothes against her body, outlining her beautiful curves. Her hair was also messy. Her hair hung loosely down and half of her face was covered by the wind. Only her delicate red lips and blurred eyes could be seen, which made her look like a mortal. Li Yunxin stood outside the pavilion and quietly watched her leaning against a pillar, with one leg on the railing, drinking like a secular Jianghu person. After a while, she withdrew her gaze from the lake and turned to lean against the pillar to look at Li Yunxin. Her hand loosened and the empty wine pot fell into the lake. She tilted her head and looked at him for a while with drunken eyes. Then a lazy smile appeared on her lips. "Why did you bring a person back?" Li Yunxin knew that the person in Red Lady's words referred to those ordinary secular people without any cultivation or mana. He could also hear that she was a little drunk from her words. He came to see her to ask about the prohibition again, but he didn't want to hear her talk about it. So he smiled. "He's not a person, not an ordinary person. He's a dissimulated person." Unexpectedly, Red Lady giggled. She reached out and brushed her hair on her lips. She shook her head slowly. "Dissimulated person? What kind of dissimulated person is he?" When she spoke, she didn't seem to care about the old man. She just said casually, "Isn't he Su Weng from the Su town by the lake? I've seen him many times in the past few years. His ancestors used to be fishing. When his great ancestor was young, he caught a box of gold and silver jewelry from the lake with a net. That was how he became rich. Then he started a business and bought land. Later he became rich to his descendants, but he still lived by the lake for generations. He said that Dongting was the place where his family made their fortune. This Su Weng. I watched him grow up. When he was young he was eccentric. He didn't like to study or do business. He only liked to play around and almost lost his family business. Fortunately he had a pair of good children and took over the family business. Then he gradually recovered. When he was old his temperament became even more eccentric. I used to be bored by the lake, so I often sneaked to see those interesting people. He was one of the most interesting people by the lake, so I had an impression of him. How could such a person become a dissimulated person in Li Lang's eyes? Li Yunxin listened to her in a daze. After 2 breaths she blinked her eyes and asked, "Are you serious?" "Of course it's true. When have I ever lied to you?" "But you..." Before the beauty could finish her rebuke, Li Yunxin's figure flashed and disappeared from where she stood. Chapter 213. The weirdness of this thing is beyond his imagination. He thought the old man's words, "his children sank the boat," were a metaphor. It might refer to some of his former subordinates betrayed him, defeated him and exiled him. But now, from Red Lady's mouth, that matter was actually confirmed. He can no longer calm down, and the curiosity in his heart is very strong. He feels that since he met this old man his mood has become more and more intense. Now he knows that his curiosity may not be a good thing and it's not his usual style, but he can't hold back and wants to leave immediately. He rises to the sky by riding the demon wind. His body shakes and then shows up as a dragon with a length of 300 meters. Then he goes straight to the south bank of Dongting Lake as fast as lightning. It took him 4 or 5 days to go around Dongting before. But now he has a general destination in his mind, and he is traveling in such a shocking way. His speed is much faster than before. He sets off from Mount June in the early morning. By noon he has already seen the south bank. Kun Wuxia, a cultivator in the mysterious state, seals the inhibition of the 1,000-mile Dongting with a thin layer of mist. He doesn't let Li Yunxin see the scene outside Dongting and only leaves him a blue sky. When he patrolled around Dongting before he also tried to break the thin mist with the supernatural powers and Taoist spells, but it was in vain. At least in terms of spells, a Taoist in the mysterious state does have an advantage that a true state cultivator can't resist. However, when Li Yunxin is about to approach the south bank and shows up in the sky, he suddenly finds that the thin layer of mist on the south bank is gone. He sees it clearly. There is a small dock far away, but it has been destroyed by the previous huge waves, leaving only a few rotten wooden piles. However, the road leading to the small dock is still intact and there are people coming and going on the road. This is no longer the territory of the city of Wei, and it is not even the Hezhong state which belongs to the Wei River. But after all, it is the state capital of the Daqing state and the customs are similar. Li Yunxin can tell at a glance that this is a funeral. He has seen such a way of doing things outside the city of Wei before. A stage is set up every few miles and a troupe is invited to perform, regardless of whether people are listening or not. There was a platform on the way to the pier and there were quite a few people there. For the time being, Li Yunxin didn't think about how the thin mist barrier dissipated. He just hit his figure and flew to within 10 feet of the southern shore. He tried to walk out but the restriction's gentle yet resolute force pushed him back. Thus he stood quietly at the end of the road watching the people in front of the stage. Red Madam said that the old man was indeed Su Weng who lived in Su Town. And Su Jin Li Yunxin knew about it. The city of Wei was the capital of the Hezhong prefecture. The south bank of Dongting Lake was the state of the South River. But the river here was not the Wei River but the South River. The South River was not a branch of the Wei River. Although the river was not as wide as the Wei River, and the amount of water was not as abundant, it was a long river that ran through the east and west of the Daqing state. The mountains along the coast were not as majestic as the Wei River, and the hydrology was not as complicated as the Wei River. However, these just happened to meet the needs of people. In this era there were no horribly huge ships. The South River with a gentle water flow was enough to meet the trade needs of the Daqing state. Actually, the transportation lifeline of the Daqing state was not the Wei River, but the South River. Li Yunxin had learned about the prefectures along the Dongting Lake, so he knew that the capital of the state of the South River was the Huiqing prefecture. When he met Lu Laodao and the people of the Qiao's escort agency on the road for the first time, they were returning from the city of Huiqing to the city of Wei. In fact, it was much faster to go by water than by land. However, the businessman who asked for the escort probably felt that it was not as safe as walking on the water in the Dongting Lake, so he entrusted the escort to Qiao Duanhong. But it was also because of this that Li Yunxin met them in the city of Wei and the Qiaos encountered those swordsmen and the whole family was killed. Later, Li Yunxin was forced to do many things in the city of Wei, and many people died in the city of Wei. Now, no matter Daotong, Kenzhou demons or Li Yunxin, they all felt that they had their own reasons. But no one asked who the tens of thousands of people who died actually offended and lost their lives for no reason. It was a pity that when the hero drew his sword, the common people suffered for 10 years. But these were just emotions flashing in Li Yunxin's heart. If he were a real teenager or a middle-aged man with a pure heart, he might reflect on these emotions and try to make some changes. However, after all, he was not a real teenager, nor a middle-aged man with a pure heart. In the previous world he was called sinister and black-bellied. In this world he was also called a demon. He selectively magnified some of his feelings and suppressed some of his feelings, which was the opposite of Su Weng. Now he stood on the dock and recalled what he knew about the Huiqing prefecture of Hunan province, the Su town under its jurisdiction. The reason why he paid special attention to Su town was that the clan power and scale in this town was terrible. This Su town was the second most prosperous place in the Huiqing prefecture after Huiqing city. Although it was called a town, it was more prosperous than some remote big cities in the prefecture. The population of the town was 60,000, but only a few hundred people did not have the surname Su. The decree of the Huiqing governor was useless in this town. It was said that the head of the Su family in Su town was really useful. He used to think that it was interesting that the head of a big family could compete with the governor of the same place. He also knew that this kind of thing often happened in ancient times, but after all it was just hearsay. Now, even though it was hearsay, he could see a living example, so he paid more attention to it. Now, if what Red Madam said was right, the head of Su town that he was interested in before was Gong Su, who was terrifyingly clever. In Red Madam's mouth, Gong Su was a dissolute prodigal, a playboy with no ability. In Li Yunxin's eyes, Gong Su was a mysterious man with great magical powers and brilliant Taoist magic. These two impressions could not be reconciled in any case. However, after Li Yunxin stood by the lake and quietly observed and listened for a while, the doubt in his heart did not diminish. Instead, it became stronger. According to the people on the shore, the house of the Su family in Su town collapsed overnight. Gong Su, the head of the family, died, and so did his son and daughter. The cause of death was Gong Su's birthday a few days ago. His son and daughter knew that the old man liked to play most, so they drove the family's gaily painting boat to Dongting to celebrate his birthday. Not only the three of them, but also the heads and stewards of the branches of the Su family were on the gaily painting boat. Almost all the leaders of Su town were on that boat. Then it poured heavily from the sky. The people who talked were not knowledgeable. They only knew the word poured heavily to describe the water column made by Kun Wuzi. Everyone knew that there was no way the people on the ship would survive. After the people died, they didn't see their bodies, so they should have gone to the lake to salvage them. But now Dongting Lake was also blocked. The gaily painting boat set off from this dock, so they could only worship at this dock. The council members of the Su town all gathered here these days. There were too many things to talk about. It should be known that the Su town was not only a town, it was also a huge economy with industries all over the country. It was no easier to deal with these things when almost all the high-level leaders were dead than to govern a small country. However, people didn't know how to explain the water column that day. They also didn't know how to explain why Dongting, which had been fine for thousands of years, could only be seen but not entered now. After the initial shock and panic, some people found a reason. There were schools of Daotong and Kenzhou and Huiqing. Any officer in the city knew to make friends with those Taoists and treat them as distinguished guests. Therefore, some people said that the magistrate of Huiqing hated that the Su family was not under his jurisdiction and coveted the property of the Su family. He persuaded the cultivators in the city with real money to kill the Su family. People didn't know what kind of state could make such a big move, nor did they know the cultivation of the cultivators in the city. However, as long as they knew that those people were immortals, the inference and logic were self-consistent. Red Lady's statement was confirmed. However, she said it casually at that time. In fact, Su Weng was much more important than what she said. But it was understandable. The daughter of the Lord Dongting would not care about the gold, silver and property of those people. For thousands of years, many ships had sunk in Dongting. Digging it casually would make people as rich as a country. Li Yunxin listened from noon to night. Some people were far away and couldn't hear clearly, but he could recover the words from the words of others. He used 6 hours to go through all the sayings of the people near the pier and memorize them. When he couldn't get any valuable information, he dived into the lake in the afterglow of the setting sun. He tried to go back to the Deepwater Island where he met Su Weng for the first time and looked for possible corpses in the water. However, it was not an easy task. A small pond might be stagnant. It was quiet and motionless when there was no wind. However, a big lake like Dongting could almost be regarded as a small ocean. The temperature and density were uneven, so there were many large and small undercurrents under the water. The surface was sparkling, but there might be a whirlpool under the water. The undercurrents at the bottom of the lake crisscrossed. After so many days, the corpses had not been divided and eaten. No one knew where they had gone. Li Yunxin showed his Dharmakaya of God and Devil and stood at the bottom of the lake for a while. He realized that he had to find some helpers to do this. The immortals in people's minds in this world were similar to those in his world. They didn't need to use spells and supernatural powers. One moment they might end people's life and death, help people change their fate or move mountains and rivers. The next moment they might argue with mortals because of a meal. They were just tools for people to express their wishes, and they were symbols of romanticism. However, neither Li Yunxin nor the Lord Dongting could ask Dongting to give him what he wanted just by waving his hand. The Lord Dongting used to have shrimp soldiers and crab generals, so the 9th young master must have a few assistants. However, even if the 9th young master had some assistants, they would probably scatter after his death. And the Dongting of the Lord Dongting, Li Yunxin felt that there must be more than 2 demons, him and Red Lady. In such a large area of water, it was impossible to say that there were no little demons subdued by the Lord Dongting. He didn't pay attention to those demons before because he didn't know if they were the chess pieces left by the Lord Dongting. Since the Lord Dongting had a way to run out to find the dragon after the inhibition was opened, he might also have a way to control some aquatic demons. He wanted them to get some information from Li Yunxin. But now that he had to use it, he just used it. He was a generous person. He didn't need to pay attention to those who turned around to deliver the message. It was not a big deal anyway. Those who made trouble in front of him, he would just kill them. It was not a big deal either. He suddenly widened his eyes in the water, and countless tiny undercurrents immediately appeared around him. When he was on the land, he could breathe clouds and make wind and rain. In the water, he could also stir undercurrents. This was his new instinct. It was a natural ability of the dragons. Those tiny undercurrents carried his dragon chi and spread in all directions. They told the demons who might be hiding everywhere in the Dongting lake. A big dragon's monster came to the Dongting and was declaring its existence and territory. At the same time, it issued an order to summon them. From this point of view, it was indeed no different from those beasts who used smell to mark their territory. And this was also one of the reasons why Li Yunxin didn't like to do this before. However, after half an hour, he didn't see any people. Li Yunxin breathed a sigh of relief and realized that something unexpected might happen again. He would not overestimate the loyalty and courage of the demons. The big monsters in the lake might not want to pay attention to him, but the little demons were not so bold. The Lord Dongting was not in the lake. Even if he occupied the nest, he was still a big monster in the real realm. At this moment he could really threaten them. However, even a small fish didn't show up now. But he waited for another hour. The tiny undercurrents went further and he finally saw the 4th existence with spiritual intelligence in the lake. It was a mermaid. In terms of appearance, he had to say so. This monster had a human body and a fish tail. It seemed that he had just reached the critical moment of transformation. However, he couldn't make further progress because of his lack of personal ability, so he fell into this embarrassing situation. The monster Reiki was very heavy. It was released a few miles away, as if it was afraid that people didn't know it was a monster. Some big monsters would restrain their monster Reiki. Only those with insufficient personal ability would release it. They didn't release it actively. It was the leakage of monster Reiki and Wacken. He looked like a man with a round face and a smiling face. He had fat arms and a belly. However, his lower limbs were slender and crimson. The combination of the two looked really weird. This monster seemed to be shy. He lingered in the undercurrents for a while before hiding behind a big stone full of watergrass beside Li Yunxin. He peeped at him secretly. Li Yunxin had sensed him a long time ago, but he was not in the mood to make friends or win him over. He just wanted some information. So he asked without looking back, "Why are you the only one here?" Chapter 214. The red-tailed demon seemed surprised that Li Yunxin had noticed him. But he was not afraid. This was out of Li Yunxin's expectation. The demon in the lake should have heard of the 9th young master's reputation. Now that he had released his dragon chi, he should know that Dragon Sun had arrived. As he asked, the red-tailed demon swayed along the current and came to his side. He circled around him 3 times and looked at him carefully. Then he spoke in human language and clicked his tongue in wonder. "Brother, your attire is really awe-inspiring. But today the cave master and the demon general have gone to discuss important matters with the 10th young master. Brother, who are you dressing up for?" Li Yunxin listened to the demon's words and was slightly stunned. But after a few thoughts flashed through his mind, he frowned. He immediately used his magical power to disperse the undercurrents that were being sent in all directions. Although he knew nothing about the red-tailed demon's identity, status, or faction, the 10th young master was enough to make him cautious. The 9th young master was called the 9th young master, and now there was a 10th young master. Could this be a coincidence? His expression changed. He planned to get more information from the red-tailed demon. But then he realized that he seemed to be used to suffering. There was probably no other true state demon in the world who had been wronged like him. He was originally a cultivator of the transcendent state, and his cultivation level was not low. But they were both in the transcendent state, but Ling Kongzi was the center of attention, while he had to hide and pretend to be courteous. Later on he became a true state demon. He was supposed to be able to go anywhere in the world, but he kept encountering powerful cultivators. After such a torment, no matter what he encountered, his first reaction was actually, "I'll trick him." Li Yunxin sighed and leaned towards the red-tailed fiendish demon. This demon was also a tactful person. He smiled and moved closer, wanting to hear what Li Yunxin had to say. Unexpectedly, he was grabbed by the neck and pulled to Li Yunxin's side. Although he was not good-looking, he had some skills. First, he struggled with all his might. He discovered that his opponent's strength was unimaginably great. He immediately revealed his true form and tried to escape. His true body was a slender little red carp, and he could slip away with a flick of his tail. But how could the dragon's ability to make water be compared to these aquatic creatures? Immediately he felt the water around him weave into a dense net, trapping him within. The red-tailed demon looked stupid, but at a time like this he had a temper. With a shake of his body, he revealed his half-man, half-fish Dharmakaya and shouted, "Do you know who I am?" His body immediately glowed red and the upper half of his body inflated like a balloon. A row of fangs appeared on his face, making him look like a ferocious demon. Li Yunxin casually slapped him in the face and immediately, the newly advanced fiend celestial returned to his original state. All the fangs in his mouth were scattered to God knows where. The demon's ears buzzed from the slap, and his face felt like 2 pieces of hot iron were stuck on it. Not a single part of his body was not loose, and he felt like he would fall apart if he was hit by the water again. He immediately retracted his aura and temper and begged for mercy. "Spare me, Grandpa, spare me, I was blind." Li Yunxin did not mind and only asked, "Who is the 10th young master?" The demon's eyes darted around, and just as he was about to make up a lie, he heard Li Yunxin say, "Speak carefully. After listening to what you said, I'll ask someone else. If it matches, then it's fine. If it doesn't, humph, I'm missing a fish tendon rope." This time he quickly gathered his thoughts, covered his face and said, "The 10th young master is a powerful demon, the 10th son of the dragon god. But she only lives in Dongting and never goes out of the lake. No wonder you don't know." Li Yunxin's expression was calm as usual. "Do you know that the dragon god has 9 sons?" The demon answered, I know. Li Yunxin shouted, "Then how dare you lie to me?" The demon panicked and waved his chubby hands. "Please don't be angry, your majesty, please don't be angry. Although the 10th young master is a dragon, she is not born of the dragon god. The 10th young master is from Dongting, a giant flood dragon. Do you know about the giant flood dragon? The giant flood dragon is a kind of water monster in this lake. I don't know where it sensed the dragon chi and it was born from nature. The 10th young master who had attained the Tao of the great serpent could be considered to have the bloodline of the divine dragon. However, unlike the other 9 sons who were born of the divine dragon and other demons, the 10th young master said that he was the true son of the dragon. But he can't stand the cheating of the other 9 sons, so he lives in seclusion in the lake. Speaking of this, his voice gradually faded, because he saw the pair of red antlers on Li Yunxin's dharmakaya. At first he thought it was a disguise, but now, the more he looked at it, the more it looked like the real thing. So that's it. What the red-tailed demon said seemed to be the truth. The truth, he thought. Li Yunxin thought for a while and felt that it was not impossible that the evil flood dragon in the lake had become a Taoist. But the possibility was not high. Lord Dongting killed the evil flood dragons every year, there should be no fish that escaped the net. But this red-tailed demon knew the word flood dragon, so the 10th young master must know it too. Back then the Lord Dongting was surprised that he knew the word flood dragon, which meant that this matter should be a secret in Dongting. So whether the 10th young master was an evil flood dragon or not, she was probably not simple. Li Yunxin asked again without batting an eyelid, "What did you mean when you said that I dressed up like this?" The red-tailed demon spoke more carefully. He looked at Li Yunxin nervously and said, This matter is because the 10th young master said that she is the dragon's son, so she likes to call her residence the Dragon Palace. She also likes to call the masters of the 36 caves and the demon generals of the 72 schools as dragons, saying that they are her own dragon's son. 36 caves? 72 schools? The demon hurriedly explained, "This cave is not that cave and this school is not that school. This cave is actually a cave in the lake, a cave occupied by a big demon. It imitates Daotong and Kenzo and is called a cave. The school is also the undercurrent of the lake. The water is lush and there are many aquatic creatures, so it is also occupied by demon generals. It's called a school." Li Yunxin sneered, "You're quite ambitious. So you think I am an outsider demon seeking refuge with the 10th young master? But you can't feel the dragon chi?" The red-tailed demon had been nervous for a long time, and now he finally heard this. He trembled even more violently. He stood in the water, bent over and was about to kneel down like a human. He said repeatedly, "You really are the Grandpa Dragon's son. I have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Grandpa, you must know in this lake, I really didn't know it was the dragon chi. This lake usually..." Li Yunxin thought for a while and roughly understood. A part of the divine dragon's soul was sealed in this lake, and every year 2 or 3 evil flood dragons would cause trouble. Dragon chi could not be found anywhere else, but it was probably not rare in this lake. When the evil flood dragons wreaked havoc, it would spread everywhere. These demons were used to the flood dragon's aura. They couldn't even tell if this aura was the dragon chi, right? In their eyes, the dragon chi was probably just the smell of the evil flood dragons. Perhaps other demons in the world had the same smell and it was not surprising. Good. The ignorant are not guilty. Li Yunxin squinted his eyes and thought. He was in the body of a demon, and when he squinted his eyes, his golden eyes turned into slits, looking cruel and dangerous. The red-tailed demon was even more nervous. He wanted to find a way to escape, but there was no way out. Li Yunxin asked again, "Does the Lord Dongting know about this?" The demon answered hurriedly, "A big demon like the Lord Dongting would not have the time to care about us. Besides, Dongting is so vast that it would take more than a month for someone to sail the boat from one end to the other. We don't want to offend the old man's dignity. If we still need to do our best, the old man would not care about us." This was in line with Li Yunxin's deduction. Dongting was so vast and the Lord Dongting needed some powerful subordinates. But he probably would not delegate his power to the lower levels like human beings. Instead he would do enfeoffment like countless big demons. But it could not be compared with the enfeoffment of human beings. At most it was a loose union. If there was something, they would gather people to do something. If there was nothing, no one was strictly the master of the school. However, this 10th young master seemed to have a plan. She created a nondescript 36 caves and 72 schools under the eyes of the Lord Dongting. No one knew whether the Lord Dongting didn't know or didn't care or both. So, Li Yunxin asked him, why did the cave masters and monster generals in the nearby waters go to the 10th young master's place? Also, why didn't you go? You sound like a big shot. The red-tailed demon showed a bitter face. Grandpa Dragon's son, you are flattering me. I am just a little demon under the command of the 10th young master. I was sent out to patrol the lake because the monster kings had something to discuss today. Grandpa Dragon's son, look at Dongting. This water area occupies 20 to 30% of Dongting, and it is the territory of the 10th young master. There are still some unruly demons in other parts of the lake that are not under your command. They are not convinced by 10th young master, so I have to keep an eye on them. Even so, the situation in the lake was actually very complicated. Dongting Lake was as wide as the land of a state. With the presence of the Lord Dongting, the cultivators almost didn't make trouble. The Lord Dongting was not a lord with a strong desire for power, so the demons in the lake flourished. Just like the general trend in the world, they all respected the Lord Dongting as the common lord, but in fact they all had their own territories and small kingdoms. Li Yunxin had been patrolling around the lake, passing through countless demons' territories. In normal times, there may be some bold demons who come to stop him. However, maybe it is because Dongting has just been turned upside down and is completely sealed by a layer of inhibition. Demons don't know what happened, so they don't want to tangle with him. He interrupted the red-tailed demon's complaint. Tell me the important things. What did they go to discuss? While listening to the red-tailed demon, he was thinking and analyzing the situation. Therefore, his expression slowly relaxed and he looked absent-minded. The red-tailed demon observed him and thought he might have a chance to escape. Therefore, he continued to say carefully, but it was not about anything important. The 10th young master had a friend on the land called Zhou Xian who lived in Su town by the lake. A few days ago, Zhou Xian and his family came to the lake by boat. The man asked the 10th young master to help him make a storm to get rid of a group of people on his boat. The 10th young master had been friends with him for decades and received many benefits from him, so he agreed. Unexpectedly, the 10th young master made a storm and sank the big boat. When she protected Zhou Xian's boat to the shore, oh my God! It suddenly rained heavily from the sky. This heavy rain. In the end, the 10th young master failed to protect Zhou Xian. The whole family died. After all, we were friends. The 10th young master asked us to find the body of the Su family and bury it next to his dragon palace. We also asked all the monster kings to go and pay their condolences. By the way, we can talk about the sealing of Dongting. It was really a case of wearing out iron shoes in fruitless searching only to find it by chance. Li Yunxin was happy in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. He pondered for a while and laughed. Oh, speaking of this matter, I happened to run into the corpse of the father of your 10th young master's friend, Zhou Xian. I just happened to run into it. I came to Dongting to have fun, but I was trapped and couldn't get out. So I wanted to make some friends. Let me ask you, does the old man look like? He described Su Weng's appearance in detail. The red-tailed monster didn't know whether he really knew Su Weng's appearance or he just wanted to get out of Li Yunxin's hands. He nodded after hearing Li Yunxin's words and showed a happy expression. Yes, yes. My 10th young master said that the most important thing to people is kinship. She said that although they killed each other when they were alive, they probably hoped to be buried in the same place after death. And the meat of the Su family that we found has. He stopped at this point and smiled embarrassedly. Anyway, it's a good thing. My 10th young master will be happy if you really use that old man as a gift. Li Yunxin nodded. What's your name? The red-tailed monster was in a hurry to bring Li Yunxin to his 10th young master. If he brought Li Yunxin there, it would be a negotiation between big demons and it would be none of his business. He hurriedly said, Your Majesty, my name is Bo Erba. I am an inspector under the 10th young master. I carry a red coral bone token with me and I patrol this area. Before he finished his sentence, Li Yunxin had already hit his head with his palm and killed him on the spot. Then he waved his sleeves and casually stirred his soul into pieces. He found a wooden token with mottled red paint on it. He frowned and clicked his tongue, then put it into his sleeve. With a shake of his body, he transformed into the appearance of the red-tailed demon, Wave Erba, and swaggered towards the south. He said that he couldn't find the demons in the lake because he didn't have any clues. Now Bo Erba talked a lot of things, including the 10th young master's residence, appearance, and the number of demons under her command. Li Yunxin remembered it all. He also knew that the 10th young master was called Dragon Son, so she must have a way to produce some dragon qi. He searched as he walked. After 2 hours he knew he was in the right direction. Chapter 215. In ordinary people's impression, the bottom of the lake and the beach are probably covered with sand and beautiful and lush with all kinds of aquatic plants. But the real situation at the bottom of Dongting Lake is different. Many places are only covered with a thick layer of mud, with a few thin and weak grass sticking out sporadically. There are usually no fish in this kind of place. Even the hunters lurking in the mud are starving. In some places, there are protruding stones like mountains on the land. When the water flows here it will slow down or cold and warm will collide. Therefore the bait is rich and there are more fish. With more fish there are more fertilizer and the aquatic plants are lush. This kind of place is like an oasis at the bottom of the lake. With a larger area, more bait, more fish and lush aquatic plants, people will know that this place must have an owner. Li Yunxin cruises on the uneven bottom of the lake for a long time, and finally finds a place with lush aquatic plants in front of him. But it's not because of the terrain but because of several ships. He doesn't know whether they are official ships or merchant ships and he doesn't know when they sank. As far as the eye could see they were all squeezed together, creating an undulating terrain on the flat ground. At this time the big ships are all made of wood. The wooden ships sink and the wood rots. There are a lot of salts in the hull which are loved by small fish and shrimps. It also seemed to have been deliberately cultivated. So when Li Yunxin saw this place what came into view was actually a forest. He doesn't know what kind of aquatic plants are, but they grow tall and straight in the water like towering trees. The roots are on the wooden ship and the white whiskers hang down. Fish and shrimps go in and out of the forest. Outside, there are large areas of aquatic plants and reefs of different colors and shapes. Li Yunxin looks at the reefs, which seem to be transported from Lake Tai by the rich people on the land to make a landscape. But there is no special design here. They are just piled up in 2s and 3s. However, the advantage is that the Lake Tai stones are originally beautiful so they are not ugly even if they are randomly placed. Secondly, the colors of the aquatic plants in the lake are much richer than those on the land. The two of them complemented each other, creating a different kind of flavor. When Li Yunxin arrives here he sees the monsters in the lake. Although Murky, the red-tailed demon that he had transformed into, looked strange and not like a human, it could already be considered as having a Tao. It was rare to see a beast with spiritual intelligence and even rarer to be able to transform into a human. Otherwise, why would there be fewer great fiendish demons than the high-level cultivators of the Taoist orthodoxies and sword sects when the number of beasts in the world was more than 10,000 times that of humans? When the storytellers in the marketplace talked about demons and devils, they often said that some demons and devils had hundreds or thousands of demon soldiers under their command, and how awe-inspiring they were. However, these were all nonsense from the secular people who did not know how to cultivate. Dongting King has ruled Dongting for 3,000 years and the lake is vast. However, how many human-shaped demon soldiers are there under him? When Li Yunxin first met Hong Yang, there were only dozens of people around her, and that was the extravagance of a demon princess's wedding. Therefore, the demons that he saw here were not randomly wandering around and bumping into each other. This demon looks a bit like Murky, the red-tailed monster. They are also half human and half fish. But Murky's upper body is fat and his lower body is slender. This one has a fat lower body and a slender upper body. Seeing Li Yunxin, he is anxious. Why did you come back so late? Our king has been waiting for you for a long time. Our king has something for you to do. Li Yunxin doesn't say anything. He just stares at him coldly for a while and then says, "Do you remember your name?" The demon is surprised and says, "Ah? You don't remember me? I am Bo Urban and you are Murky?" Li Yunxin doesn't change his expression. He walks around him a few times and says, "Tell me, why did our king summon all the monster kings here today? What does our king look like? What kind of behavior does he like? How does he deal with him?" He comes to complain first. That stupid demon Bo Urban is stunned. But after a while he laughs and points at Li Yunxin and says, "Ah, did something happen to you when you were patrolling the lake? Do I look like an imposter to you?" Li Yunxin doesn't joke with him. Frowning, he took out the red coral bone token from his sleeve, which he had found on Bo Erbai's body. He asked Bo Urban to look at it carefully and then said, "Look carefully, this is the red coral bone token the king gave me. When I went out to patrol the lake, I bumped into a walker with a hairy face and a big mouth. He was holding a stick that could be long or short at will. He said that he was looking for his master. When he saw me, he shouted to kill me. He even transformed into a demon and almost cheated me of my token. Now that all the monster kings are gathering, we can't let anything go wrong. Quickly tell me everything I asked you. I want to see if you are that walker. Then I can report to our king." Hearing him say this, Bo Urban is shocked. He frowns and says, there is a big demon in the lake who can change his appearance. A few days ago there was someone flying around the lake. Could it be that person?" Li Yunxin didn't answer him, only urging him to hurry up. Seeing his anxious look, Bo Urban felt it was funny, but in the end he still told him the whole story. After listening to him for a while, Li Yunxin knows why Bo Urban was patrolling the lake and not Bo Urban. Although Bo Urban was not exceptionally clever and well-behaved, he was able to speak well like a human, and he even had his own thoughts to fuss about. And this Bo Urban was stupid. Previously, when he told Li Yunxin about his king, it was only to prove that he wasn't that hairy thunder god walker. But as he talks, he becomes happy. He talks so happily that he gets carried away, forgetting the time and what he came here for. He not only tells what Li Yunxin asked him, but also tells him what he didn't ask. After talking for half an hour, he pats his head and says, "Oh, I'm so happy, but I'm delaying the king's business." At this time, Li Yunxin has figured out what the 10th young master wants to do. She said she wants to help bury her friends on the land who are in trouble, but it's just an excuse to gather all the monster kings here. What they want is something else. Someone found the demons in the Dongting through some unknown channel. They told them that a big demon in the realm of truth is in the Dongting and they want them to go there. Demons are willful and unreasonable, but they can't be manipulated at will. The reason why the 10th young master is willing to do this is, it's said that the one who entered the Dongting is Dragon's son. Li Yunxin doesn't know if Dao Tong is doing this. But just a few days ago, Kun Wuxi declared war to him so seriously and sincerely. Li Yunxin also has a good impression of that Taoist. But this good impression is not because of Stockholm Syndrome, but just because the Taoist he met before is not a gentleman. Although Li Yunxin is not a good person himself, he always feels that Dao Tong and Kenzo should be the righteous in the traditional sense. Since it is righteous, it should be righteous. It's full of things that are worse than demons, which is really unpleasant. Kun Wuxi doesn't have a good relationship with him, and he has even become a mortal enemy at this moment. However, after all, he is a bit like an orthodox Xianmen. He can declare war openly and then persuade him. If he can't persuade him, he won't say much, which is quite like the style of ancient Confucian generals. Therefore, Li Yunxin feels that what is happening in the Dongting at this moment, from the standpoint of Dao Tong, they do have a reason to do so. But he always feels that there is something evil about it. Li Yunxin is good at this, so he is very sensitive to this smell. It is the smell of a conspiracy. Things may not even be as simple as he thinks now. If he is asked to do this, it may only be a beginning or the first step of a game in a game. However, since he can smell this smell and likes it most, he naturally knows how to solve it. This is the lesson he learned from Yunzi. When he can completely crush the conspiracy with his strength, he should never make trouble for himself because of the mentality of playing and watching. Now he thinks of another organization that has been appearing and disappearing in the past few months, but it seems that it has always been stirring up trouble. That Freemasonry. Their people are a little crazy, cunning and evil, which is in line with Li Yunxin's style. However, Li Yunxin doesn't like him very much, so he has no reason to like them. After figuring this out, he asks the monster Bo Air to confirm all the details he just said. Then he lets out a long sigh. According to what Bo Air said, the 10th young master is indeed a big demon. It sounds like she is at the peak of the transcendent realm and can use thunder and lightning. But the problem is, in the white forest of Lord Dongting, even the weakest evil flood dragon has the strength of the realm of reality. How can he, the 10th young master, who was transformed by the evil flood dragon, fall back to the transcendent realm? Demons don't know these things, but Li Yunxin knows. Besides, the monster kings who come to the party today are also in the realm of emptiness and transcendent realm. When he throws the 5 monsters under his seat to Dongting, they may also become monster kings and monster generals. At this time he once again understands the old saying, only those who have suffered the most hardship can become the best. Before he always met those old monsters in the realm of reality and the realm of mystery. Those below the transcendent realm are just small fries in his eyes. But now, Li Yunxin smiles. As soon as he smiled, a flaw appeared on his face. He turns into the appearance of Bo Erba, but it is not a transformation. Demons only have one chance to transform from an animal to a human. What they become is what they look like. Even if there is any change, it is just like what Li Yunxin is doing now. It is a camouflage. However, he was playing with a bunch of soldiers anyway. This camouflage technique was something he could casually make a few hand seals and draw a few lines. It was not a special skill. Therefore, when he smiles happily, his face faintly shows his true appearance. Bo Erba is stunned at first and then his eyes widen. He points at Li Yunxin and says, "Ah, you." Li Yunxin doesn't say anything. He kills Bo Erba with a palm and disperses his soul. He clears his throat again and runs to the lair of the 10th young master in a panic with the red coral bone token in his hand. He yells, "King! King! What a disaster! What a disaster! A walker with a hairy face and a mouth is attacking us." The lair of the 10th young master is hidden in the depths of the watergrass forest, but it is not on flat ground but in a crevice deep in the forest. Li Yunxin holds the token high. The watergrass that has been refined by spiritual power automatically moves to two sides, making way for him. After walking for a while, he realizes that it is really a demon's lair. All kinds of strange heads poke out from the watergrass. They are all demons that have transformed halfway. There are dozens of them. They don't seem to know what Li Yunxin is yelling about. They only know that something bad has happened. They take a few glances and then shrink their heads back. Li Yunxin walks for a while and really sees a crevice under a big sunken ship. It is called a crevice, but it is actually a canyon under the water. From here it is dark. No one knows what is hidden under it. At this point, Li Yunxin hesitated for a moment before sighing. He said that he is afraid of water. It is true. But neither Lord Dongting nor anyone else will believe that he is afraid of water. He is not only a big demon, but also the son of a dragon. In their eyes, he is a cruel and sinister person. If he is really afraid of water, wouldn't it be a big joke? He tells the truth, which is rare, but no one believes him. Since no one believes him, he will not use it to make a fuss. Now that he is staring at the canyon, he knows that it is not a good scene. The 10th young master is a demon in the transcendent state, and the demon kings and demon generals around her are all trash. Not to mention the dragon palace, there may not even be a summer palace. The canyon is hidden in the watergrass and the water is not flowing very well. At first glance, it is murky and cold. Sand are flying in front of him. There is also a rotten smell in the water. He is not sure if there are corpses piled up in the water. He only paused for a short while. Then he heard the sound of water flowing and lightning flashing in the canyon. Then a group of strangely dressed demons surrounded a young man in a white robe and rose to the surface of the water. But looking at this young man, he had a round face and a wide mouth. The corners of his mouth seemed to be naturally pressed down as if he is always angry. It can be said that he is not angry. He also has a nose. However, his nose was flat and collapsed as if someone had punched him in the face and pressed his entire nose down. But this nose is not the weirdest part of the face. It is the eyes. Li Yunxin looked for a while before he found his eyes. They are hidden under the eyebrows, 2 dots the size of green beans, and the eyes are only a slit. He looks like a character from the comic books in his world. It is very funny. And this 10th young master's eyesight is not very good. Surrounded by a group of demons, he frowned and looked around before he finally locked onto Li Yunxin's direction. He shouted, "What happened? Why are you so panicked?" Li Yunxin walked in front of him and said, "Your Majesty, this is bad. There's a handsome, elegant and carefree killer outside. He's already here." The 10th young master frowned and tilted his head. "What killer? Where is he?" Li Yunxin was already in front of the demons. It was only then that he realized that the 10th young master was indeed blind. Tiny electric arcs as thin as strands of hair extended from his body, like tentacles, helping him to detect his surroundings. One of them probed Li Yunxin's body. The 10th young master frowned. But he heard Li Yunxin laugh and his body shook and returned to his original appearance, shouting, Idiot, your grandpa Lee is here. Note 1. Stockholm Syndrome, Stockholm Effect, also known as Stockholm Syndrome, or hostage complex or hostage syndrome, refers to a complex in which the victim of a crime has feelings for the perpetrator, and even helps the perpetrator in turn. This emotion causes the victim to have a good impression of the perpetrator, to rely on the perpetrator, and even to help the perpetrator. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.